na irofi tuko tukinyitania na okahinda gatari haria matumanyithio uria mutataro ucio ugukorwo ugitabaruka mwena ucio wa bunge na ithu tugithii na mbere na uthathauri wa budget tuli studio hamwe na mutaramu wito oikeneta Gerard Githuku ririkana niguo CS athiko uria bunge nene ya bururi no ginya aume kuria office-ine ya kigina guku bururi-ine aume hau ari na gathandũkũ karia akuaga kari ka budget ya bururi athiko uria bunge nigetha amenyithi abunge uria ugayania wa mbeca ugukorwo githie na mbere mbeca iria ikwanjia gukorwo ikihuthika kuma mweri wa mugwanja mwaka uyu turi nginya mwaka turorete muthia-ini wa mweri wa gatandatu ugayania uyu wa mbeca uhana atia tondu mathabu macio ni manjirie kurekererio hana haria kwa mawoni maku budget ino niragutungatira urita muingi wa bururi wa Kenya urita murimi muonjoria muruti wa wira nyiraigwa budget ya mwaka uyu wa kigina igikuruboya na njira utanyete no twariri kuhitukira namba itu ya ndomereri nguhe na 2288 kana nginya mwana wa Facebook muriki wa mushoki ntuko tukigeria kurogororia ndomereri icio uria tugukorwo tugithii na mbere na ithuĩ gũkũ studio tuli hamwe na mutaramu witũ tuthii na mbere na guthathaura budget ya bururi ni twacokereria ringi karibu sana ithaa riri ria miaraho mathaa ma rũcinĩ tuhutirie ũhoro wĩgiĩ thirĩ na ũrĩa tũngĩiganania mbeca iria irakombo na mahũthĩro ma mbeca gũkũ bũrũri-inĩ ũndũ ũrĩa ũkoretwo ũkĩhutia mũingĩ gũkũ bũrũri-inĩ na gĩkĩro ũndũ ũrĩa ũkoretwo ũkĩhutia mũingĩ gũkũ bũrũri-inĩ na gĩkĩro kĩnene nĩ ũnyihu wa maguta ũnyihu wa indo ta iria gatagatĩ ka maũndũ mangĩ ta macio na rĩmwe mũingĩ nĩ ũkoragwo ũkĩhĩtũkĩra mathĩna maya na mwena ũkũragana
wa growth ya economy tari mwaka uyu global economy irakũra na 4.1% na sub-Sahara Africa irakũra na 3.6%. Thĩinĩ wa Kenya irakũra na 4.7%. Reke tuona kwĩna prospect ya bũrũri gũkũra tondũ harĩ ithimi rĩthomagwo na ũhoro wa GDP ũhoro wa ũtonga wa bũrũri
GDP na indo iria turutaga kana guciarithia o gũkũ bũrũri-inĩ
gũkũ thĩinĩ wa domestic market rĩu koguo icio ndicio parameters irĩa ihũthagĩrwo nĩ thirikari kũmenya ũtonga wa bũrũri harĩa ũkinyĩte no ngĩta ũhoro wa impact ya economy nĩtuonete maguta makĩhaica mũno ũguo auga na maguta marahaica tondũ wa maũndũ marĩa ma inflation na inflation nĩ arehwo nĩ nginya haro ĩrĩ kuo kũrĩa Russia na Ukraine tondũ maguta marĩa maingĩ ma Russia na kwĩna haro nĩ kuga atĩ matikota kwendia maguta ũrĩa mendagia kũrĩ mabũrũri marĩa mangĩ rĩu nĩkĩona kwĩna maũndũ macio wathiĩ ũhoro wa nginya irio Ukraine nĩo maheana maguta ma kũruga rĩu kona kwĩna less supply andũ nĩ magokorwo na wagi ũcio wa indo icio kũrĩ maũndũ maingĩ marĩa maragĩtũma nginya maguta magĩthiĩ na mbere no tuona thirikari nĩ ĩkoragwo na kĩndũ gĩtagwo subsidy gũcompensate mũndũ ũcio aheana kĩndũ kĩu okorwo nĩ ũhoro wa maguta andũ arĩa marehaga maguta metagwo all marketers nĩ maheagwo mbeca cia kũmagirĩrĩria gũthiĩ hathara na icio nĩcio tugaga subsidy na ũngĩtarauta mwaka ũyũ thirikari ndĩrĩhĩte mbeca icio almost 13 billion na nĩgetha ũhoro ũyũ ũrĩkuo rĩu wehere thirikari nĩyarĩhire 8.2 trillion nĩtuonete thirikari nĩrageria kũhe andũ arĩa mararehe indo icio subsidy o kũmahũthĩria mathogora mao nĩgetha mahote kwendia maguta macio na bei ya ĩrĩa mũkenya kũhota ona ũngĩthiĩ ũhoro wa bataraitha no nĩ bataraitha ĩraumire kuma 1,500 nginya 5,000 thirikari ĩna kĩgĩna kĩu gĩa gũcompensate mũndũ ũcio ũrarehe bataraitha nĩgetha nake ahote gũthondeka baita tondũ no nginya mũndũ agĩthondeka baita na kwĩna maũndũ maingĩ okorwo nĩ ũhoro wa ũrĩmi kwĩna ũhoro wa locust iria ciokĩte bũrũri ũyũ na kwĩna ũhoro wa covid na kwĩna ũhoro wa wagi wa mbura so kwĩna maũndũ maingĩ makoragwo makĩ-affect maũndũ macio ma basic necessity ta maguta na ũhoro wa irio na thikari tuonete gĩũka kũheana kĩgĩna kĩnini nĩgetha andũ mahote gwiteithia
umwe wa maundu maria mangi muingi urahitukira na ni umwe wa maundu maria mahagikitwo na njira thiini wa budget ino ni kugeria kuruta bururi kuma hari muriko uria COVID-19 yaingiririe bururi hari guo mwaka wa 2020 kambuni nyingi ikihingwo andu aingi makiurwo ni mawira na riria kambuni cia hingwo na andu aingi morwo ni mawira uguo ni kuga thirikari ni iraga igoti tondu andu aya mabutwo mawira matihota gukorwo magithi na mbere na kuriha igoti riria kambuni cia hingwo andu aria othe marandikitwo mawira ni morwo ni mawira macio tukiuma hau hari mwaka ucio wa COVID-19 na gutuika hari na mwaka muhituku wa 2021 tugithie tuyukiriirie uguo ri ni mitatara iri ku thirikari ingihagika nigetha twirute fiu hari hathara ri twareheirwo ni COVID-19 tuli ta bururi nigetha nari muthia wa mwaka uyu gikinya kana tugikinya mwaka uyu ungi wa kigina tukorwo hihi ni tucokete kana tukuhiriirie gucoka haria twari mwaka wa 2019 mbere ya COVID-19.
Okay, thank you. Ugira ria COVID yokire Kenya 2019 kana ari 2020 thirikari ni yokire na measures ya gucushion andu ao the citizen a Kenya to thirikari ni yokire ni ya gwithirie magoti ugita VAT yari 16% ikigwithia ika 14% for mwaka mugima ona pay as you earn anyway itaxagwo mutu wa wira ona ni anyihirio ni maheane ma exemption ona thini wa tourism ni maheane exemptions nigetha mahote andu acio mahote kwiyukiriria ona twathi horo wa youth economic stimuli ni maheane mbeca nigetha youth mahota na makiyukiriria no ngita riu ndeke no thirikari no nginya irore uri guteithia sector imwe to sector imwe ni hatiriru muno ugitata tourism ni ndiyambire kwiyukiriria ugita horo wa transport ni ndiyambire kwiyukiriria ona maundu maingi ona manufacturing ndi ugitara andu aria mautaira maganda-ini andu hindi na COVID twarucire like 5 million jobs na iganda nyingi magana mana nene ya hingire riu no na maundu macio no
kinya ha mawira macio matire maracoka uria mari
mati macoka haria mari na kuguo no thika no nginya yuke na incentives no nginya igerie kuhereria ukonta murimo nini ukonta murimo nini mojoria munini hata kweria magoti mako ta income tax kana heyo exemption igeti ni heyo tax holiday ya miaka 5 atakuri igoti getha mundu ucio hote kwiyukiriria na hote guthi na mbere na maisha make
tuli ta bururi na rimodo na mone mako makiuga ta tutari na wiyathi uria tungiuga niguo wiyathi wa ma tondu mwaka wa 2013 hari horo wigi maguta na tugithiaga na mbere mbica icio rona ni cia speaker wa bunge ya bururi Justin Muturi ari ofisini yake agithi na mbere na mehaririria tondu ririkana niwe ugukorwo akiamukira CS wa kigina guku bururi ni ukuria tani kuria bunge-ini ya bururi ari ta speaker wa bunge nigetha CS akorwo gitariria muingi kuhitukira abunge aria mathurire uria mutatara wa ugayani wa besha utafanitio ni ruhonge rwa kigina hamwe na bengi nene guku bururi-ini hari ugayania wa muigana wa budget ya trilioni 3.3 o ministry igairwo besha cigana o honge igairwo besha cigana andu akuru gatagati ka honge ingi itiganite thirikari ni ugayani ucio wa besha ririkana kuringana na watho CS agiriru korwo agithie gutariria abunge uria ugayani ucio wa besha utafanitio kana urathi na mbere no ririkana umuthi CS ukuria tani ni guthoma budget ya bururi no mutatara uyu wanjiririe mwaka muhituku wanjagiriria mwaka muhituku tondu bunge ni ikoragwo na itena inene muno hari uthondeki wa budget magatwarirwo mendekithia ma mahuthiro ma besha ni CS wa kigina tariu tugikinya mweri wa 10 mwaka muhituku nirio mendekithia macio matwarirwo kuria bunge nigetha bunge itaririo CS wa kigina hamwe na ruhonge rwa kigina mataririe abunge maya nimo mahuthiro maria ma besha maria turendekithia makoro makihuthirwo thutha ucio riu bunge ikamwira iha haruta haho ngongerera mbere ya bunge igikirite uhoro ucio muhuri nigetha riu budget ikorwo igithomwo iri yothe tuko twigucokia kuu kahinda gatari haraya haha naho ni nja ya ofisi ya CS wa kigina ukuria tani agithi na mbere na kurikiriria mehaririria nigetha athi kuria bunge nene ya bururi ikorwo agithomera muingi budget ya mwaka uyu wa kigina wa 2022 haha niho egukorwo agicomoka kana akiumira tukorwo na mbica cia imwe kwa imwe nigetha tukumenyithie uria egukorwo akiuma anyitite gathanduku karia CS wa kigina akoragwo anyitite gathanduku kau gatikona maratathi maingi no maratathi ma gutararia tu uria ugayania wa mbeca ukoragwo hana tikibuku ategetungu kana kinene akoragwo akuite ni maratathi ma kuonania uria ugayania ucio wa mbeca oikaire ire gukorwo ikihuthika kuma mwaka uyu turi mweri wa mugwanja nginya mwaka turorete muthiaine wa mweri wa gatandatu ukuona kuntugo twigutwara na njira ya imwe kwa imwe CS kuria tania tanyito gukorwo ikinya kuria bunge tha kenda cia miaraho na wona akinya tuko twigutwara ku ningi tuthikiriri turi hamwe mamwe ma maundu maria ukorwa gitararia na muno makiria makinya maria thirikari igukinyukia rita njira ya kungania igoti makiria rita njira ya kuriha ngombo cia bururi ngombo iria bururi woete guku bururi-ine na nginya kuma nja ya bururi gatagati ka makinya maria mangi thirikari itashukitie makurumura bururi kumana na hathara iria ikoretwo ikireho kumana na murimo wa COVID-19 toguo totarario hani mutaramu wito studio ona gutuika nturathi na mbere na kwiyukiriria tuti turakinya haria ho no itanya ni ati ni tugukorwo tugikinya hau tuguko twigutwara ku kahinda gatare haraya o tugithiaga na mbere na mutaramu wito wa kigina guku studio hari kiuria nguragio horo wigie wiathi witu ta bururi muno makeri hari uhoro wigie mbeca tondu tariu honge nene cia kigina thiini wa thi tariu IMF fegina ne yathi ni World Bank rimwe ni makoragwo magitwikirira mihaka turi ta bururi wa Kenya tariu hari uhoro wigie maguta mwaka wa 2013 ni maugire thirikari no nginye hagike igoti ria VAT riria rikarie rigitiragio nginya mwaka wa 2018 2019 riria igoti riu rianjiririe kurihio tondu niguo IMF iratwira kuri ndo tungika turi ta bururi twirugamirire tutigage gutindikiririo ni mafengi maria na honge cia nanja ii tukombagira mbeca
thank you bwana Mushoki tuguhandiri tondu no nginya tuthi twakombe nanja na ukomba nanja tugire ni kindu gitagwo deficit na deficit ya tondu wa mbeca iria tubajetiire tijiganu cia mahuthiro ma twi namo riu ngutira horo wa IMF kana IMF makoretwo makiuga no tuhote kwirugamirira no kegwatira handu ha mundu handu ha maguta maherie igoti ri ka mekirwo igoti thikari nyite mbeca icio ihuthire mbeca icio na kwa kaburi koguo hagona spillover effect tondu wa uri he igoti na wone service iria thirikari ukunengera tondu maguga no ni balancing act tondu rugiro ute cigi 10 na thirikari gwakire farashi 10 no na dona lose so nikionaga the mavuri macio manja makira kuga no nginya mwikira matho maya ona kwende maugite VAT koragwo iri exempt na VAT na ina VAT na zero rated magwa indo ciothe exempt orwa mitu ciothe cikiro VAT icio mbeca cio thirikari yonjorithie na nigetha Kenyans mone benefit cia kureha igoti
nayo mitu na indo ici irekirwo igoti riri igie goro
no nginya igie goro tondu 16% no nginya kiongererwo no kwa tukatiri it's a side me to the other one unena mbeca thikari nyite na thikari huthe mbeca cio wega itena na ungumania yonjorithie yoke mabarabara ikure hindu cia kurima na nigetha thikari nigetha economy ikure
hari uhoro koretwo kiariririo muno ati turi ta bururi wa Kenya ni tuthiaga gukomba ngombo itari njega iria ciina goro gukira ingi tutarari hau ha mithemba ya ngombo
ngombo ni maita meri ngombo citagwo public debt na maita meri hari ngombo cia guku domestic cia thakari na ringi cia nanja cia nanja niko maita cia nanja niko kiruta Eurobond no ni thirikari kendia 2021 ni kendia Eurobond ni koragwo na guthi mafengi ma nanja ta China Exim Bank ona maburi maria mangi gwetha ngombo no ketuge gitumigire tumathikari thi nanja tondu mathina ma nanja ni mari raithi tondu kuri mangi na muthia muka negotiate muka extend repayment period na nigetha muka time ya gwetha mbeca kuriha nikiona thirikari mostly igithi nanja gukomba tondu ni makoragwo matina na matho maingi muno ta ma maguta ma ukomba guku thiini wa bururi wa Kenya
nigetha tukure no nginya tukorwo wa mbere tukiamaira guku bururi-ini na tugerie uria othe tungihota twithondekere indo iria tungihota guthondeka guku bururi-ini handu ha gucigura kuma na nja niki thirikari itakoretwo igikire hari horo wigie iganda na ona gutuika ni mwa maundu maria mari thiini wa Big Four kana ituge inya iria President Uhuru Kenyatta anireire iri cia gukuria bururi wa Kenya uhoro wigie iganda ona gutuika imwe cio ni cianjiririe gukiririo kana gukirio kana kurugamio ringi nduri urekerero toria turona uhoro wigie waki wa mabarabara mademu reri ugikirirwo na gikiro kinene ni mathabu mariku mareko
katuge nikiuria kega tondu gita thiini wa Big Four intention ya thirikari kore Big Four yaugite manufacturing it is supposed to have 15% of the GDP ikore kuma kuri iganda-ini no rigi magithii ku import ukonta shuma ukonta import cia manufacturing magithii ku import tondu wa magoti maria mari guku thiini wa roko bururi wa Kenya koguo most tondu wa charge thika ikanekira mbeca nini magatwara mbeca nyingi icio na gutwara mbeca nyingi maundu-ini mangi no nyende kuweta bwana Muchoki tondu ukitara thirikari ni akite mabarabara muno SGR twena express irathi kurika mweri uroka na ni mbeca nyingi muno but those are capital intensive project na thirikari ka project long term iko na long term effect nigetha tuombeire kuona faida ya mugithi faida expressway ni go take a lot of time no intention ya thirikari ni in the long term munemi ucio barabara ihituke gwake arima indo ikarehe ginya thoko-ini koguo no nginya tukona maundu macio tondu tukiuga ati iraneana ya 600 billion kwa vaki wa
jitikiria mbegura ngani twambe tugutwara kuria bunge nene ya bururi tunyitanire na Airwa Nyambura akianiria hamwe na Speaker Justin Muturi
ya bunge itikani namo no iregane namo na ere maundu mangi meru na twina andu experts mandikire twandikiria jumbe akumonereria uria magire mapendekezo maguteithia mwananchi
abuge cio uraigwa magithii kuhena kuga ati muturire ni murito igoti ungimera
mubunge ndagirwo guthi kunegena na kuria githaka-ini kana ku icagi-ini aguka kure agwena matitarera kurehe amarehe guku bunge na participate na guthondeka watho wa guteithia Wanjiku
thengio reke turukurekereri nigetha ukanyite ugeni minister nigetha tuthomere budget ni speaker wa bunge ya bururi Justin Muturi akihanyuka na ithu tukuhanyukania nake nigetha tunyite ugeni minister Ukuria Tani atutamburukirie budget ya mwaka uyu
ucio ni mwarikita muno Airwa Nyambura akianiria na Speaker Justin Muturi siasa wa kigena Ukuria Tani ni hindi riu arauma ofisini yake bica icio tuona cio hau kabere nitukuonetio uria hekuhanaga riu nuona ni hageire kana ni kugeire na mihango akiuma ofisini yake etereirwo kuria bunge-ini ya bururi-ini Justin Muturi nigetha akorwo riu agitararia bunge mutatara wa ugayania wa mbeca gathanduku karia gugwataire niko kau anyitite na wona akinya nja ya ofisi yake ni gukoya iguru iri ta njira ya ukionania we hamwe na ruhonge rwa kigina ni mehariirie o wega nigetha makorwo magithomera abunge budget ya bururi ya mugano wa ciringi trilioni 3.3 wona twakinya kana akinya kuria bunge-ini ya bururi ntu twara kuna njira imwe komo no uma nja ya ofisi tonia kurugama hau nigetha onani gathanduku kau ni tuko tukurehera mbica icio na njira ya imwe kwa imwe bata wa budget ya bururi ni gukorwo budget ingi ya guthomwo honge itiganite cia thirikari itingimenya ikuhuthira mbeca iriku gutabania mitaratara itiganite yo thii wa na mbere ni ukoretwo ukiigua mucirithania munene akiuga ni megwaka magoti ni mekuongerera acirithania icio ciothe ni mbeca ikoragwo ikiheanwo thiini wa budget ukaigua minister wa barabara nake akiuga ntugwaka barabara na yume kunethie kuna mwene kandarathi mbeca icio ciothe ihagikagwo thiini wa budget ni gia guthomwo ministry kana ruhonge oro ruothe thiini wa thirikari rutingikorwo na mbeca cia mahuthiro macio uguo maundu no makwame ino nta budget iria ikago thiini wa nyumba riria kamucara kaingira kari ga kuma wira-ini kana nginya biacara ingi itiganite ukagania ukamenya mwana munabithi ne ciringi ngiri cigana ona irio tukuhuthira ngiri cigana ona marihi ma thitima tukuhuthira mbeca cigana ona mai cigana ona ici ingi ciatigara ri he karugiri karaumanite handu gaka ni tugathondeka nigetha gakorwo gakiagira he muberethi uraita mai ni gukorwo ugithondekwo ona gutuika riu rimwe riria twakiuga mbeca ni twaga mbeca njiganu twakomba guku bururi-ini na nginya nja ya bururi uguo ni gukiuga riu no nginya tugike mathabu tugikioya bururi uri ta nyumba bona githuku tugithi na mbere ugutaragiria horo wigie
horo project ici nene cia thirikari
ici nene cia thirikari na tukirigithania ici nene tari kwa muhiano reri barabara ino ya expressway icio wagweta ri niki kiagarire guka mbere ni ici nene iri kunina miaka 10-15 20 nigetha twanjie kuona matunda kana maciaro ma mitatara yothi wa na mbere kana ni tumetata tunina nini turia tukunina miaka minina nini mbere ya tukinyete hari ici nene kwa muhiano barabara iria ikiranitie matura-ini iri guteithiriria arimi kumeria magetha mao kumeria iria na nginya kuhota kuma mukiro umwe wa county kana wa matura mathie mukiro uri ungi twagarire kuiganania mitatara eno yeriete gatakati ka area minene na area minini irateithia muingi na ihenya
ugirora thini wa budget thini wa allocation ya infrastructure niako na long term na short term na thikani huthagira mechanism tondu ngitara riu oro wa miaka tau nao ta barabara ya expressway irauma airport yukite go serve uko industries thini wa Kenya ugita SGR no guo koguo no nginya thirikari ko balance imenya tiri barabara ino ya kuria county ri no nginya nyita na bara nene na no nginya bara ino ne interna reri na no nginya nyita na ndege koguo tudigiota kudijoint tudigiota kweheria indo ici ciere hamwe kono thika no nginya ko balance no nginya tukore na miaka ya long term miaka 10 no nginya tukore na short term nigetha economy hote gukura thini wa bururi tukiari horo wa uhotekeku wa gutabania biacara iria tugaga ease of doing business bururi wa Kenya ni ukoragwo ri iguru muno kana wina uhotekeku wa ahuri biacara gukoma gyoka guku bururi nigetha mahure biacara niki kiroragwo tukiari horo wigie uhuthu wa kuhura biacara thiini wa bururi muna kindu kia mbere ni kindu gitagwo magoti magoti maria mari bururi-ini nimo determinant turaiko magoti mari iguru noguo thikari takwenda ku attract andu kumana jama invest thini wa bururi ucio togo horwa magoti ma income tax toga ma igoti ria mutu wa wira togo horwa customer kira hindo tondu mundu ucio kaguko no nginya hindo kuma kuri buri wake arego Kenya no nginya rore magoti no nginya urore thirikari iriku ni thirikari stable aiko ni kundu kona haro ta bavuri ma tukigwa mena haro ndio ta ku attract andu kumanaja maundu maingi muno ta kindu ona infrastructure accessing ya the factories kuna mafarafega ma guthie go serve kuria go invest na incentives nyingi muno ona horwa tax exemptions nituonaga mavuri mangi makihana tax exemptions so andu ma tax incentive tawira mundu ukaburi wa Kenya miaka 10 ndukureha igoti na miaka yonge twodi kureha at rate ni gukira mundu uria utakimita kuja so nturora horwa thikani mundu ucio ni arora horwa magoti ni arora horwa administration ya bururi ucio urehuana ni arora horwa on accessing to other to mavuri macio magi mari in the borders tondu akwendiru ciake iria ragithondeka
ni twirega bururi wa Congo ni wirega kuingira thiini wa ngwatano ya urumwe wa mabururi ma Africa ya irathiro kana East Africa Community undu cio ukorwo gituteithiriria teithu turita bururi wa Kenya turi guo bururi uria munene muno kana ukurite muno hari mabururi maya ma East Africa ri kuingira gwa Congo guguteithiriria gukuria bururi wa Kenya na njira etariate
gituke bururi wa Kenya wako kuingira thiini wa East Africa Community ni guteithia bururi wa Kenya ni twenda thoko ya indo citu ni twakuria nĩ twagũri twĩna indo cia arĩmi twĩna matumbĩ twĩna indo cia ũthondeki cia manufacturing koguo gũka thĩinĩ wa bũrũri ũyũ gũkorwo thĩinĩ wa partnership in the East African community Kenya nĩ kũhota kwendia thoko indo ciao at the same time koguo makorwo maginya maguta mena nginya indo cia agricultural cia mũrĩmi nĩ kũmaanisha thĩinĩ wa East Africa community no tũhote gwĩ-sustain wata gũthiĩ mabũrũri mangĩ mana kũu kũraihu ta China kana thĩinĩ wa bũrũri wa America.
Koguo hangĩkorwo na mũtaratara mwega mabũrũri maya maikare thĩ ithuĩ kĩrĩa tũkũragia mũno nĩ macani kahũa inyuĩ kĩrĩa mũkũragia mũno nĩ hihi iria kana kĩndũ kĩngĩ ta kĩu tũhote gũcenjania irio icio na gĩcigĩrĩra-inĩ gĩkĩ no tũhote kwĩrũgamĩrĩra ũndũ hihi mabũrũri maya marĩ mothe mekũnyihanyihia ngombo
nĩguo tondũ ũrĩa gũthiaga mũimportaga kĩrĩa mũngĩ produce thĩinĩ bũrũri wanyu nĩ goro mũno tũngĩtaga bũrũri ta wa China ũimportaga andũ aingĩ mathiaga gũthondekera indo kuo tondũ nĩ raithi gũthondekera indo kuo China koguo mabũrũri maimportaga marehaga indo iria gũthondeka kwao nĩ gũkorwo na thogora mũnene na makĩendia indo iria mahotaga gũthondeka na mbeca cia raithi koguo tukiuga mabũrũri maingĩ maingĩ hamwe rĩ nĩ synergy nĩ gũteithania inyuĩ mũgathondeka kĩrĩa mũgũthondeka na cost nini na mũkamake baida yanyu nene na mũkacoka kũrehe maũndũ mũka-import indo iria gũthondeka kwanyu nĩ gũkorwo ĩrĩ hathara kũrĩ bũrũri koguo in the process kana andũ magakorwo matarĩ na thogora mũnene wa gũthondeka indo iria menacio
tũngĩoya bũrũri wa Kenya ũrĩ ta nyũmba ya mũndũ kĩũmbe rĩ tuge nĩ nyũmba ya mũcoki nĩ ekĩte mathabu make wega thĩinĩ wa mũciĩ wake
mũcoki mathabu tuge nĩ mega ndĩrarora ũrĩ wa explain atĩ ta mũciĩ tondũ ũrĩ mũthũkũmi wĩna mũcara ndũgĩthiĩ kũ budget mũno gũkĩra mũcara waku tondũ ũkĩenda mũcara wĩna school fees wĩna ng'ombe wĩna entertainment wĩna ciana no nginya make sure mũcara waku no ũigane na mahũthĩro maku ũngĩkorwo na ka deficit harĩa kĩanda rĩ no ũgĩthiĩ ũkombe ona no ũkũburica
kana ũhoe mũrata
koguo no kĩtuga bũrũri wothe ota family tondũ rĩmwe nĩ ũrakwĩra mũndũ ndina mbeca cia gũthomithia mwana rĩu ũthiaga bengi wakomba nĩgetha ahote gũthondeka ka deficit kau so wakomba ũgaburica ũkarĩha macio nĩmo metagwo it's a way of kũmanage thĩinĩ wa mũciĩ waku
haya mbica icio iragũkinya na njĩra ĩmwe kwa ĩmwe nĩ cia CS Ukur Yatani akiuma ofici-inĩ yake arorete kũrĩa bunge-inĩ nene ya bũrũri na gũkũ nĩkuo egũkorwo agĩthoma budget yake nĩtũgũkorwo tũgĩthiĩ na mbere na gũkũrehera mbica ici na njĩra ĩmwe kwa ĩmwe nĩgetha tũrĩ hamwe tũkĩrore ũrĩa thabarĩ yake ĩgũkorwo ĩkiuma kuma kũrĩa ofici-inĩ cia kĩgĩna gũkũ kaunti-inĩ ya Nairobi nginya kũrĩa bunge nene ya bũrũri maabitha a borithi makĩgeria gũtigĩrĩra atĩ ũgitĩri nĩ mũgacĩrithie o wega nĩgetha CS agĩkinya kũrĩa gũtarĩria ũrĩa mahũthĩro ma mbeca maikaire ndagakorwo na wagagu oro wothe rĩmwe rĩrĩa ũiguaga ambunge hihi makĩũria ciũria igũrũ rĩa budget na nginya thutha ũyũ nĩ megũkorwo makĩruta mawoni macio wona arĩkia gũthoma budget ĩno ndĩna mambunge nĩ megũkorwo makĩruta mawoni mao matiganĩte rĩrĩa waigua makĩruta mawoni mao amwe makĩmenyita mbaru makiuga budget nĩ njega arĩa angĩ makiuga ĩ haha nĩ ĩngĩracenjirio ũririkane mũtaratara ũyũ wothe nĩ ũkoragwo ũkuruhanĩtie ambunge na gĩkĩro kĩnene mũno budget ndĩngĩhĩtũkio bunge ĩtahĩtũkĩtie mendekithia ma mahũthĩro ma mbeca na angĩkorwo bunge nĩ yakĩrĩ na ciũria oro ciothe kana mũbunge mũna nĩ aiguire harĩ mbeca ciekĩrirwo harĩa itagĩrĩire kana we kũringana na mawoni make onire itiagĩrĩirwo gũkorwo igĩkinya gĩkĩro kĩna arĩ na kanya kana mweke wa gũkorwo akĩrehe ũhoro ũcio kũrĩa thĩinĩ wa bunge nĩgetha mogarũrũku macio makorwo magĩtabanio tondũ ona gũtuĩka CS nĩwe ũrathomera bunge budget ya bũrũri bunge ĩno nĩyo ĩmwĩraga kĩrĩa egũthoma kana nĩyo ĩmũheaga rũtha rwa gũkorwo agĩtĩkĩria mahũthĩro macio ma mbeca ntuko tugutwara ku na njira imwe kumwe kahinda gatari haraya bona githuku umwe wa maundu maria tuge maikaragira bururi muno ni horo wa hinya uria tuhuthagira kana energy tondu gutiri bururi ungihota gukura gutari na energy njiganu na thiini wa bururi wa Kenya ona gutuika kuri miene imwe tutongoreti tariu hari uciarithia wa hinya wa ruhuho kana wind power kuria mugunda uria ukoragwo kuria thiini wa kaunti ya Turukana ni tutongoreti thiini wa gikiro kia Africa na njira ya guciarithia kana kuruta thitima irahuthira ruhuho no ningi warora mwena uyu ungiri maguta ni maragia goro thitima yo nyene iri na goro muno makiria na twina maguta marathi na mbere na guthuthurio nigetha tukimenya uria mekwanjiriria kwenjo no ko ni miaka tuge no ko ni 10 kuma muthenya wa umuthe niki ithuĩ tũngĩka nigetha twĩhũni harĩ mahinya marĩa tũhũthagĩra tondũ tũtarĩ na macio iganda ikuhũthĩra thitima nyingĩ ihũthĩra maguta mena goro ciaruta indo ici kana ciathondeka indo ici thogora ũcio ũkorwo ũkĩhĩtũkio ũgathiĩ kũrĩ ithuĩ rĩu arĩa tũragũra indo no tũkinye gĩkĩro ta kĩa mabũrũri marĩa manene kwa mũhiano Amerika ũrĩa magũraga maguta makĩigĩra nigetha rĩrĩa kwakorwo na thĩna makahũthĩra go kahora kahora.
Thank you bwana Muchoki ũhoro wa mahinya ma energy ugitara orwaya green energy niguo thirikari irageria kwendia na itore thirikari miaka ino ri hakuhi ni marageria kuhena exemption ati ugiko wi biashara ya green energy no hetu exemption cia kweherio VAT na magoti mangi ukahe tax holiday ya miaka 10 tondu ugitara energy tuhuthira currently togoro wa gas nekirwo VAT 16% na gas iraumire from gina magana manana yathi hakwi ngirinya tondu wa magoti thitima ina VAT koguo turona thirikari intention yao ni andu mathii kuri green energy na nikiona mageria gwikira kinya magoti mono kuria kwina environment effect kuri thini wa ikaria ku koguo ora kuigira maguta niki uhoro wa kuigira maguta ri at the moment Kenya ni ku import maguta na kwina magoti maingi marikuo thirikari is supposed to ire no kita maguta maria thirikari yambagire kwenja kuria Turukana ri all those wells kabuni ya etagwo taru ni augire ni atigana na ithima icio tondu cost ya ku produce maguta ni expensive thikani yageretie kiwa ni kurehe kundio nginya Mombasa na makirehe maihore meri matwarwo makari final koguo the cost area ya maguta ndigireka thirikari ikona stock enough ya andu kuihuria maguta koguo no nginya ikare igitagia maguta na kuria na ikiona kwina thina wa maguta tondu nginya marketers marehe na makombezetwo mbeca iria marendia maguta mao raithi
tukirora horo ngi wa tarinza tarari horo wigi thitima ya ruhuho na ithu tutongoretie undu uria ungitutongoretie thiini waguo ni horo wigi andu aingi gukorwo ni mari na thimu makihuthira internet kuhitukira thimu ukiringithania na mabũrũri mangi thiini wa gitaro kia Africa niki turatongoria hari maundu mamwe no ningi mangi tukahanta tutigitwo na thutha na mothe togutariirie ri mokaga makanyitana nigetha mothe makurie bũrũri uri wothe
ketuge ni sector no dimete sector taru gitara berei-ini orwa digital services thirikari yatuire thini wa group worldwide thirikari ni ndirambire kumenya no mahote guthondeka mbeca kuri digital services tondu hari mundu rahuthira digital services aragura indo kuma kuria US arahuthira kambuni cia kurehe indo no gutinde ndarehe igoti no tuoni riu KRA marokana thikani rokana horwa digital services tax iyo ndi igoti wahuthira service iyo no nginya urege igoti aiko nduru wa Kenya koguo ni 1.5% koguo ni tuona ono gukuri kundu Kenya yathi kiambagia thika na mwambia ikamenya na nyono nginya ire gacuca ka igoti kuri haria mureka ega fiu so thika ni guonaga ikaene bwadu magena thimu no in the process no mari yuka magutie kagoti
koguo irarehe internet ne kahotithia andu gukona thimu nigetha nayo ona ni andu othe marateithika muingi ugateithika kwina internet mena thimu nayo thirikari gateithika na igoti riu
ni horo wama
igoti riria turnover tax riretagwo TOT na nä arehire gicanja muno andu makiuga onjoria nini magũkorwo makihinyiririka kana magikunderio hari wonjoria wao thirikari na ekiuga nĩ tũrabatara igoti rĩ nĩgetha tũkorwo tũgĩkũria bũrũri ona gũtuĩka biacara imwe nĩcionaga ta ingĩthirĩra hau igoti rĩrĩ rĩarĩ rĩiganania atĩa nĩgetha biacara iteithĩke na thirikari iteithĩke
ketuge bwana Muchoki turnover tax gwĩciria thikari ana itanya rega tondionaga Wanjiku uriraria thukuma ndagetoika mathabu make ati nigetha arihe igoti yaugaga we wendia indo iria wendia muthenya ucio ukariha 1.5% kiria wendia utakurora expenses ciaku igoti uria arihe tondu wa kwenda kurora informal sector tondu informal sector ndugira Wanjiku athondeke mathabu maria endirio hwaine kwati okay tondu wamenya kiria wendirie ri tugiturihe 1.5% ikora igoti riaku no tuonire rikihurwo muno rirahurirwo muno tondu kindu kia mbere ni ahinyagiria Wanjiku muno tondu 1.5 kwimwirarihe ni mbeca nyingi na nikio gwathirwo igoti-ini kuri andu magitegera mathire igoti-ini na orocio kiamba kurugamio ona ndeke no irugamie tondu igoti ndikirira hena macira no ndiona intention ya government ya thirikari maybe ona hiyo mothe budget igithomwo no nginya mageria kuthondeka igoti ringi parallel na turnover tax tondu no nginya thirikari igeri ku correct tax kuma kuri informal sector
koguo oria turathi na mbere onokorwo ti uko rigitwo riri turnover tax kana riri TOT no nginya hakona magoti mangi mare meguka
niguo mbere ya presumptive yatagwo presumptive tax istio yategetaga mundu munini riu magicenjia magimita turnover tax koguo I'll not be surprised kuna thikari ikidivert tondu aiko igoti niriagirie igoti riri then no nginya magerie gwetha income from that source koguo niraikire tukiona hii thikari ki introduce igoti ku replace ria kirugamio na igoti
tuli ta bururi wa Kenya tuli umwe wa mabũrũri maria mari gicunjĩ kinene muno kia andu aria ethi kana andu aria nini thiini wa gitaro kia Afrika na nginya thiini wa thi hando ya Roma niki thirikari ingika nigetha ihuthire resource ino ya andu anini andu aria ethi anio mena hinya anio maretha mawira anio mararuta mawira niki thirikari ingika nigetha ihuthire andu aya ethi na njira njega o ene makure andu aya ethi na nginya bururi guo mwene ukure
thirikari ndona ungirora miaka ndo riho ari maundu ari maatha mathondekwo ni Treasury maratagete muyuthi nituonire makirehe maatha ma TVET makiarukite mbeca kuri technical and vocational training colleges ici ni cia guteithia mundu uria muyuthi uria wagiririe utakona na marks ya guthi university no athi thomeka kothi ya moko thikari ni kona some kid facilities ya youth and the less fortunate ati muyuthi kete kwambia biashara gake ni aguthia heo mbeca na hote kwambia biashara kanini tuona youth tukithi town ino ya Nairobi ndukora na huku town yake ni youth mena tuthimu mena tu tondu maheto mbeca hi makombithio ni bengi microfinance makahota kama undu macio nituna thirikari ningi no iragiria no iragiria ku compensate ati we uri mwandikana uri mwandikani wandika youth ameteka interns ni gucokerio cost yo urihite muyuthi ko tuna thikari kira kia gikumudi ati andu magerie kuona experience nigetha na mathi interview mode kwa ndiko mawira na mona mawira so tuna thikari katuma utu ingi kuri boyo jethi
tugathi na mbere na gucokeria ngatho cia mwanya ni gwitikira utihokera mathaa maku nigetha tukumenyithire mutatara wa guthomo kwa budget urathie na mbere ni hindi riu CS Ukuria Tani erekeire kuria bunge-ini ya bururi hamwe na honge itiganite cia thirikari iria ihutanitie na kigina nirona hau ni murugamiriri wa bengi nene guku bururi-ini amemba matiganite ya kamiti ya kigina makiumana nake nigetha kana makimuma thutha amatongoretie nigetha riu maingire kuria bunge ndeka cigana na kuma riu gukona giikara kuria bunge thiini nigetha riu CS Ukuria Tani aheo rutha ni speaker wa bunge ya bururi Justin Muturi gukorwo agithomera muingi wa bururi wa Kenya budget ya mwaka wa kigina wa 2022 na 2023 thutha ndeka cigana ona tugutwara kuu na njira ya imwe kwa imwe guku ni bunge thiini kuria tugukorwo twikuingiria kahinda agatari haraya tukirikiriria bwana Githuku hari horo wigie tunyitithanie hihi horo wigie githomo na ugima wa mwiri maundu maya meri thirikari ingimatangikira ri no ikorwo ikinyihanyihia ukia na hathararia bururi wonaga riria andu manyitwo ni mirimo kana riria wakona mitino tondu riria andu mathomithio kwa muhiano horo wigie tari kuruboia gakenge riria gaciarwo kaheagirwo irio haha kongagira haha undu ucio ni ukudigiriria kana kau kurwara koguo muciari ahuthire mbeca thibitari undu uria gutuma ndagitari atagikire kana kauna ni angiatagikira murwaru ungi na ni kangirigiriirio gukorwo gakirwara uhoro wigie githomo na ugima wa mwiri maundu macio meri ni thirikari ingika nigetha yambatirie gikiro gia githomo guku bururi-ini andu mohige andu mariogi ukeni uikurukaga to ni marahota kumenya maundu maria megwika wakeri riria andu mena ugima mwega wa mwiri ni mekuhota kuruta wira mone mbeca iria mekuriha nacio igoti
gwiciria no worie kina wacokia tondu thikari no nginya maundu ma mako mari hamwe tungitara poverty yambagire githomo na thikari no nginya ike mikakati kuri githomo no nginya make sure kuma mwana igira cukuru nginya arikia university mwana ucio ena githomo kiganu gia kumutwara tu maira-ini na tuonete thirikari nikio ndauga ona njugire kiambiriria ndauga ati thirikari ni rongerera mbeca cia githomo totaru mena bilioni 500 cia githomo na intention yayo ni kupromote githomo nduguta CBC thirikari nauga CBC nikio githomo kiria kiega tondu mwana amenya ni gukorwo ndi engineer ni gukorwo ndi mwarimu gukorwo ndi ndagitari riko guciara ikiuma cukuru ikorwo iri andu ikimenya kuria career yao twathi horo wa health care universal health care ni thiini wa big four agenda na tuote miaka 5 thirikari ndihota kuhe mbeca sector tondu tukorwo hora machine cia county kuri machine cia headirwo na machine cia hothero ginya muthe itu ido ona igi ni ku expire nituone kuri mathivana ma level 6 na mathivamacio matina ndagitari akoigana nituonete government thirikari atagetaga by miaka 5 iko achieve 100% universal health care to the whole country no tuonete ginya riu no county ithatu kana ithano ihote kuona na that coverage kuona tuona thika no nginyagerie ciara igithoma no nginya magerie ku improve health sector mathibitari magerie kuhe dawa magerie kurehe equipment na nigetha poverty tunyihe poverty level thini wa bururi
nigetha bururi uri wothe uhote gukura thirikari cia matura nacio toruru nicio iraruta wira kana irakinyiria muingi motungata kuria matura-ini niki nacio ingikwo nigetha ihurwo njeki ate ni gukorwo ikihota hihi kwirugamirira tariu ni turaiguire thiko cigana ona county kanjo ya magavana ikiuga ati matirahota kurwa na ngaragu iri kuria thiini wa county marenda mateithiririo ni thirikari nene ona gutuika hari thire thirikari nene inaguo wa thirikari cia county nikiona cio nyene wa mbere igiteithiririo kwirugamirira nigetha gwakorwo na mathina cigetha kihonia kia mathina maya cio nyene itegukinyira kana itegukaira thirikari nene wa keri uhoro wigi ungania wa igoti wikiriro kuria matura-ini gukira uria ruhonge rwa KRA rwa ungania wa magoti runganagia igoti ari ruo muno makiria rungu rwa thirikari nene gukira kuria matura-ini
thank you bwana Muchoki ukirora thini wa budget ino ya thomo muthi bilioni 370 billion nicio irathi kuri thirikari ya matura na mbeca icio ta mwaka uria ungi yari mbeca ta icio na thinogo ukorwo ho thiini wa thirikari ya matura ni thirikari nene kumahe mbeca tondu thirikari cia matura irehoka thirikari nene kumahe mbeca na thirikari ya matura nginya ikariganirwo ati ona no makorwo na mbeca ciao no makorwo na mbeca ciao mangĩhota kwĩrũgamĩrĩra tondu ugita thirikari ya matura kuri kindu parking kuri licenses kuri permit kuri shares yekuo na maita maingĩ nĩ ũigua mbeca icio ciina ungumania mũingĩ rĩu koguo thirikari ya matura no nginya make sure onokorwo nĩ makũ thirikari nĩ gũikaria mbeca itamarĩhĩte no nginya makorwo nao marĩ self sustaining no nginya magerie na nĩkĩo na thikũ ici mena nginya magoti mao nigetha magerie gũkorwo makĩrĩ handũ mũcara maĩka development ciao na maũndũ marĩa mangĩ
haya tũgĩtagĩrĩra tũmenye ũrĩa maũndũ macio megũgĩikara speaker wa bunge ya bũrũri Justin Muturi aikarĩire gĩtĩ gĩake kũrĩa rĩu no gũkorwo agĩtereba gĩikaro gĩkĩ kĩa bunge nginya rĩrĩa arĩnengera mwaro CS Ukur Yatani nĩgetha nake akorwo agĩthoma budget ya bũrũri arĩ mbere ya abunge othe tũgĩthiĩ na mbere na ithuĩ na gũtiriha gũkũ studio nĩgetha kahinda gatarĩ haraya tũgũtware kũrĩa bunge na njĩra ya ĩmwe kwa ĩmwe harĩ ũhoro wĩgiĩ ũthundũri kana iria twĩtaga innovations tondu ũthundũri ũyũ kana innovations ici nĩcio cikĩtie mabũrũri ta ma Ngeretha bũrũri ta wa Amerika mbere na gĩkĩro kĩnene mĩtambo ĩno tũrahũthĩra ũkinyanĩria ta Facebook Twitter TikTok kuma kũrĩ bũrũri wa China maũndũ maya mothe kana mĩtambo ĩno yothe ĩrehetwo nĩ ũthundũri wa maũndũ merũ gũkũ bũrũri-inĩ rĩ nĩkĩ gĩtũmaga ũhoro wĩgiĩ ũthundũri wage kuoyo na ũritũ nĩ ithuĩ mũingĩ kana aikari a bũrũri wa Kenya na nginya nĩ thirikari wona gakari nĩ gathondekwo kaunti-inĩ ya Laikipia nĩ andũ manyita na mathondeka gakari tũgakahũthia wa mbere koguo andũ acio na matihoragwo njeki kaingĩ nĩ thirikari cia kaunti na nginya thirikari nene wa kerĩ ti kaingĩ ithuĩ twendaga kũgũra indo iria ithondeketwo gũkũ bũrũri-inĩ no waingĩra supermarket ukore kĩndũ kĩandĩkĩtwo made in Kenya gĩthondekeirwo Kenya urona ta kĩrĩ gĩa gĩkĩro gĩa thĩ koguo gathi kũgũra kĩrĩa kiumĩte bũrũri wa nanja meciria macio tũngĩmagarũra atĩa na tũhũre njeki arĩa marathundũra maũndũ nĩgetha twĩkũrie
ũhoro wa thundũri nĩ tuonete ũkĩhũrwo mũno nĩ tuonete andũ mena idea njega ya gũthondeka nginya mĩtambo ta ĩno mũciĩ tuonete mathondeka nginya ngari nginya ndege kwĩ andũ mathondeka gatĩ ga kũmbũka nako no kona thirikari ndĩnanyita mũndũ ũcio instead yagĩrĩ kũhũra mũndũ ũcio gatuĩka atĩ ũguo areka ti ndenda marũa koguo reke tuge thirikari nĩgerĩ kũhũra no reke tuge nĩ cartel tũngĩtara rĩu ta ũhoro wa andũ arĩa importers cia indo nĩo magerĩ kũhũra mũndũ ũcio ũrenda kana ũthundũri na nĩkĩo
tondũ angĩnyitĩrĩrwo kana ahũrwo njeki hihi kaũndũ kau nĩ gũkorwo gakĩneneha tũtige kũgũra kĩndũ kĩu athundũra na nja
nĩguo na nĩkĩo onaga rĩu na nĩkĩo president wa bũrũri augaga buy Kenya build Kenya nĩgerie kuga atĩ tugerie gũ-support andũ arĩa mathondeka mena na no guo ũhoro wa ũthundũri ta ũngĩtara KRA system ĩrĩa marahũthĩra ya iTax nĩ mũndũ mwaku wamĩ na innovation ĩyo augire nĩ kĩ maũndũ tweka maũndũ physical tweka maũndũ the traditional way atĩ mũndũ arageria kũrehe return kuma gĩthumo akarehe KRA nĩgetha ĩhũrwo mũhũri nĩ ũmwe wao nĩ wokĩ na innovation yakĩona no tugerie wĩka system ya kũrehe maũndũ digital kũgeria magoti marĩ digital no ũngĩtara ndagĩka ĩno mũtandao ũcio nĩguo ũrahũthĩrwo nĩ thirikari kũrehe billion icio marauga nĩ magũ correct rĩu monaga mũndũ ona kanyũmba nĩ wonekana nginya nyũmba ĩrĩa ũraka tondũ wa mũtambo ũcio ĩgethi kũrehe maũndũ ma rento igoti rĩa rento ĩkarehe ũhoro wa digital ĩkarehe wa turnover tax tondũ wa ũthundũri wa mũndũ ũcio koguo ketuge thirikari no nginya ĩgerie gũ-support andũ arĩa moka na idea na nĩgetha andũ mahote nginya gwĩkũria
haha wagweta ũhoro wa mũtambo ũyũ wa iTax rũhonge rũu rwa KRA na ti rũhonge rwa KRA tũkũruta mahĩtia tondũ wĩra waruo nĩ kũngania igoti ti gutigirira kana ti kwiyuria igoti riri mongani ari kuhuthirwo na njira etari atia. Thirikari nayo riria yongania igoti riria yoka yoya igoti riakwa kabiacara ndinako kamucara ndinako kindu giothe ngigura hari gacunje karia ndirahe thirikari riri ta igoti. Thirikari nayo niki igwika itigirire nie ndi mukenu kana ndaiganira tondu angikorwo urariha igoti ucoka igwe mbeca ni ciirwo no ningi waumira na hau hanyu gathoko-ini thoko yo ndirathiika ni kwarahu kwina mwaraho wa mai waumeria nyeni ciaku kana waru ciaku gutie na tobarabara undu uria tumaga riu no rigo igoti riri urihaga riake na riu riria kwagia na mwiciririe to cio kana attitude teyo ya ndirareha igoti na ndirona motungata andu aingi ni kwihitha mekwihitha tondu mage kuriha igoti to marona marihaga igoti no mationaga motungata maya niki thirikari igika nigetha itigirire murihio wa igoti ni mukenu
katuge of rate thirikari ni ageria muno tondu ngitara kwihitha mundu arihaga igoti tondu wa psychology of the taxpayer ati ndiariha igoti nigetha ngure barabara itu nege urami no nginya thirikari gerie kuonithia wanjiku guo ati wariha igoti nigetha service yaku improve ukona mai ukona thitima na indo iria ingi wanjiku ngira ukona that mentality arona mbeca iria rauta irathie gwika ungumania mundu uyu ndangira igoti ku nikona wona thirikari thiku ici niragenia muto ugitara last year mine na kindu marendaga voluntary tax disclosure program ni kwenda kurehe wanjiku ati ona kondu arite igoti na kuria ri we ukorehe ndaika ino tuti gukuria na kuria thutha nenda kuonia atiri we ukatu ore huana we ambie guturihe kuma riu tuikare thi twarie thikari ni athomithia wanjiku there's a lot of training kuna training muno cia kirai thiini wa buri wothe kuonithia kugerie ku encourage ati tutire thirikari tutire KRA atene ya kuhanyukia mundu ari igoti it is a teamwork na nikiona voluntary ukahewa exemptions ukirehe kahora uka-apply waiver ya penalties na ukaheo so gatuge ni psychology of the taxpayer thikari ngionithia muri igoti that we ware igoti na ici ni service ya twawikira no ngironi kwina ungumania ona kenya kungumania
hari gicunje kingi gia bururi wa Kenya tukihuthira na gikiro kinene gicunje kia 80 hari 100 gia bururi uri wothe ni kundu kumagaru no ni kundu kungihuthika tariu tungiringithania bururi wa Kenya na bururi wa Egypt bururi wa Israel maya ni mabũrũri makoo mari momagaru ta gicunje kiria kinene twina kio guku bururi-ini gike gitu ni ki tungika nigetha hihi tuhote kana tuhure njeki gicunje kiria kinini turarima nigetha nari tutige gukorwo tukihuthira ngombo na gikiro kinene gwikuria na kwirugamirira kindu kipo ikiuga mbwana mucoki wonete urimi wa kuria dry ni ruru urban tondu anakia naku kana andu anaku mona kwao ni kuoma makora maoka guku kwa inoro koguo reke tuge ruru urban na niki kindu kimwe kuga incentive cia thirikari tondu thirikari ngira andu awonjoria thiuri mekuria Turkana watofora mai cost ya utofora mai ndu kukweheria iri exempt kana uku recover with the time wandika arutia wira mena utara ku matikuri igoti kana makuri hona na this rate wa indo cia gwa kinya kwendia into exempt from taxes so kitu kini incentive thikari kigutagu gitata Egypt ugo rugo mahuthagira wethi kuria uge investment ya besha ici will kapa besha into gushokeria oru athi ukirimaga ko ne thikari no hote no nginya magerie kwarukiti besha nyingi muno agriculture tondu twakiona riu mahende 63 billion 63 billion ona guti undu gikathini wa dina impact thini wa urimi wa tukiringithania na galana kulalu iri ya haraganire galana kulalu nayo ni haraganire na twagwa tondu wa aketuge no ko ni maybe administration na kwagi wa mbura na maybe if no maragura indo cia
inputs no magura mbembe cia kuhanda
ona gutika ile matiare marime na njira ya guitiriria mimera yo mai
yari irrigation tuke but maina challenges ciao tugikiuga tondu investment yo ne arige ko pick but maybe my corner incentive njega no ne andu magithii kuna mambie kuri tondu mai mekuo no kutofora mai na kukiambiria kuweka irrigation na mahuthike
kaundu gaka ka unyitaniri gatagati ga thirikari na honge cia andu kiumbe kana private sector wambere gakoga giteithiriria bururi na njira etari atia na niki gatahimbagirio na njira nene uria kagirire kuhimbirio kuringana na ataramu a kigina na utonga wa bururi uri makoragwo makiuga
unyitaniri wa thirikari na andu kiumbe mabũrũri ma developed countries niguo makorwo makinyita mbaru muno tondu ni huthagiria thirikari murigo tondu maugaga reke tunyitane twake barabara eno kana tuke investment eno na tucie mbeca ũũ tugitara barabara eno expressway no undu menjeko mingĩ kana mabara maingĩ nĩ makunyitanĩria no gwĩciria hakwa niĩ nĩ kwaga trust tondu thirikari irakwira rehe mbeca na ndehe mbeca tuke investment ino ni ya miaka mingi riu mundu kiumbia kona thirikari ndamenya uria ugoka ndamenya hi political environment might change na higo tuko no wikio nja kana kiyo takiu so kwina maundu maingi kwina ginya ona no muge muraka unyitaniri na thirikari na andu aria marenda kuhuthira barabara iyo marekuria ma protest kana mundu ukauge ino barabara ni atuke a muingi so reke tuge tondu wa fears of lose investment yaku na maundu maingi ukona andu matindaga muno gukorwo makinyitanira iyo ya thirikari na andu kiumbe kambuni cia thirikari nacio nä kä igwä kå nä getha ciendie gå thondeka baita ta rä u mayunivasitä gå kå bå rå ri-inä rå honge rwa IMF nä rå koretwo rå kiuga mayunivasity maingĩ manyihirio mishahara na manyihirio mbeca iria magayagirwo tondu gutire baita marathondeka no kunengerwo maranengerwo mbeca ni thirikari no gutire mbeca irauma kuri mayunivasity maya igacoka kuri thirikari tondu thirikari nayo ni ikinyihirie marihi ma githomo koguo na mbeca iria arutu marariha marita marihi ma cukuru thiini wa college and university itiganite mbeca icio itiganaga kana ititigaraga undu thirikari no ikuhota guteithika na riria ruhonge rwa IMF rugire twicirie kere iguru ya university citu niki tugucieka hamwe na parastatal tondu parastatal nyingi itithondekaga mbeca no kuheo iheagwo getuge tukinyitata ma university gwiciria thaina critical position ugitara tuthoma ugira statistics irikuo university nyingi ni ina mathina ma thirikari PYE gotiria muti autia wira marengaga na matineanaga kuri KRA wathi horo wa pension ya andu a wira NSSF university nyingi ni yoite thirikari mbeca nyingi muno no ugitara utau ugitwa mwana ta strathi mo university mwana cio tamu imwe no kumuhira ngiri 150 na thikari rero irihie mwana yo ngiri 20 kana ngiri 30 no disparity yo gakora department cia university reka wega tondu iria mara correct kuma kuria uto itigigana mahuthiri ma university so ketu ko ni challenge no ginya magendi nikio ni ta university ya Nairobi VC araugire tuguciria department ya thondeka mbeca isigi I call department na less than 10 kana andu ta 10 uguo makauga no let's ketuikara thi tumenye uria tugi promote department ino but no ginya tuko na ithu twathondeka we are in a profitable position
haya ni turathi na mbere na kurumanirira na mutatara uyu wa uthomi wa budget kule thiini wa bunge nene ya bururi mutongoria kiama kia ODM Raila Amolo Odinga onake ni gukorwo giikaro-ini giki ari hamwe na ateti aria na atongoria aria mamunyitaga mbaru ririkana ateti othe kana tuge mu Kenya oro wothe ari na itemi ria kunyita hari guthomo kwa budget ni gukorwo ona ungiakurumirira kana wa guthikiriria budget githomo muthenya wa muthe ni ucangagira na njira imwe kana iri ingi na njira ya kuriha igoti riria ario nginya urihe ona iko nduri mwandike wira ndurariha igoti riria muruti wira arengagwo riria ariho mucara-ini riria riothe wagura kindu hena gacunje kanini urihaga thirikari ta igoti tugutwara kuria bunge-ini nene ya bururi tuthikiririe Speaker Justin Muturi ndumiriri iria araheana kuria bunge-ini ya bururi.
Honorable Joshua Kutuni, it is disorderly to be communicating with a member from the other side of the aisle from your place. More particularly, yes. So, honourable members, let me repeat. Now, therefore, pursuant to the same provisions of Section 40 of the Public Finance Management Act of 2012 and the National Assembly Standing Orders 25A and 244C, I will now interrupt business of the House to allow the Cabinet Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, it's once again an immense privilege for me to present to this August House and the people of the Republic of Kenya the budget statement that highlights the budget policies and the revenue-raising measures for the financial year 2022-2023. The presentation of this statement is in fulfillment of the requirements of Section 40 of the Public Finance Management Act and the Standing Order number 241 of the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, our partner states in the East African community have agreed that Kenya can proceed with the early presentation of the budget statement this month. This aligns the budget calendar with the timelines for the general elections scheduled for August 2022. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency the President Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta took office in 2013. At that time, the country had just completed implementation of the first medium-term plan of the Kenya Vision 2030 and was on the third year of implementation of the 2010 Constitution. During the first 5 years, his administration designed and implemented an economic transformation agenda under the second medium-term plan of Vision 2030. The agenda focused on five key pillars. 1, improving the business climate by maintaining macroeconomic stability, addressing security challenges, and reducing the cost of doing business. 2, closing the infrastructure gaps. 3, promoting investment in key sectors such as manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism. 4, sharing prosperity by investing in poor programs in health, education, and social welfare. And 5, fostering the devolved system of government to enhance service delivery. Building on the progress made under the economic transformation agenda, the government initiated the Big Four agenda anchored on the third medium-term plan or the Vision 2030. The government focused on transforming the lives of Kenyans through strategic interventions on food and nutritional security, affordable housing, manufacturing for job creation, and universal health coverage. Mr. Speaker, while we celebrate the remarkable achievements from the past investments in the priority programs under the economic transformation agenda and the Big Four, the country continues to grapple with various social, economic, and environmental challenges. In preparing this year's budget, we extensively consulted Kenyans. The insights, comments, and suggestions have informed the priorities laid in this budget. Key among the concerns: 1, the high cost of living; 2, high level of unemployment among the youth; 3, income inequality; and 4, public debt burden. Mr. Speaker, we have noted that most of the concerns raised by Kenyans were associated with the negative effects of COVID-19 pandemic. In response, the government developed and implemented appropriate economic policies and rolled out targeted programs that cushion the citizens and businesses from the adverse effects of the pandemic. Building on the progress realized, we have outlined policies in this budget that are geared towards returning the economy back on a more sustainable growth path for improved livelihoods. In pursuit of this, we have therefore chosen this year's budget theme as accelerating economic recovery for improved livelihoods. The government will implement economic policies and undertake structural reforms geared towards improving the welfare of Kenyans. This includes aligning and accelerating implementation of the Big Four agenda and the third economic stimulus program for sustainable growth. Mr. Speaker, conscious of the constrained fiscal space, we intend to implement these policy measures within a sustainable fiscal framework. Indeed, we have moderated our spending levels, targets, and ensured cautious revenue projections. We have reprioritized public spending towards poor expenditures in health, education, and supporting the vulnerable segment of the population. In addition, we are leveraging on the public-private partnership to fund projects, support the private sector, and narrow fiscal deficit. Mr. Speaker, the next section of my statement will give highlights of the economic policy context, policy priorities of the government, and the strategy for accelerated economic recovery. I will later provide highlights of the fiscal framework underpinning this budget, spending priorities, and the proposed tax policy measures. Mr. Speaker, this year's budget has been prepared against a backdrop of a moderate global growth of 4.4% from a recovery of 5.9% in 2021. The global economy contracted by 3.1% in 2020 following the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. However, there are risks to this growth outlook, largely from possible emergence of COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing conflict in Eastern Europe. Mr. Speaker, Kenya's economy demonstrated remarkable resilience to the COVID-19 shock in 2020 and staged a strong recovery in 2021. Following the easing of the COVID-19 restrictions, reopening of the economy, as well as targeted stimulus intervention by government, the economy registered strong recovery of 9.9% in the third quarter of 2021. Overall, the economy is estimated to have expanded by 7.6% in 2021, a much stronger level from contraction of 0.3% in 2020. In 2022, the economy is projected to stabilize at 6%, supported by recovery in agriculture, industry, and service sectors. Mr. Speaker, to further strengthen this growth outlook, the government will continue to safeguard macroeconomic stability by ensuring inflation remains within the government target range, while interest rate remains stable to support growth in private sector credit. The foreign exchange market is largely expected to remain stable, with foreign exchange reserves providing buffers against shocks in the foreign exchange markets. The current account deficit is projected at 5.9% of GDP in 2022, supported by a rebound in horticulture and tea exports, as well as increased inflows of remittances. Mr. Speaker, the economic outlook may be affected by emerging domestic and external risks. On the domestic front, reemergence of COVID-19 variant and possible adverse weather conditions could reverse the projected economic recovery. On the external front, the ongoing conflict in Eastern Europe has created uncertainties that will affect the global economic outlook through disruptions of supply chains, rising global oil prices, and increased inflationary pressures. Mr. Speaker, the government will monitor all the domestic and external risks and take appropriate policy actions to cushion the economy and Kenyans in the event the risk materializes. Mr. Speaker, in 2017, the government has progressively implemented policies and programs under the Big Four agenda to foster socio-economic development. However, the COVID-19 pandemic slowed down the implementation and full realization of the expected benefits. Mr. Speaker, to further accelerate economic recovery and improve livelihoods, the government will continue to implement and expand the economic recovery program in this budget. The program is hinged on a sound macroeconomic policy framework that aims to, 1, enhance security for our citizens and their properties while fostering a secure and conducive business environment. 2, scale up development of critical infrastructure in roads, rail, energy, and water sectors. This will ease movements of people and goods, reduce the cost of doing business, enhance access to social amenities, and promote Kenya's competitiveness. 3, enhance transformation of key economic sectors for broad-based sustainable recovery by promoting agricultural productivity, growth in manufacturing, environmental conservation and water supply, support tourism recovery, and ensure sustainable land use and management. 4, expand access to quality services in health, education, and appropriate social safety nets for the vulnerable population. 5, support the youth, women, and persons living with disabilities through government-funded empowerment program. 6, continue supporting the evolved system of government through active engagements, policy guidance, and timely transfers of shareable revenues. This will indeed strengthen county government systems and enhance quality service delivery. And lastly, sustain implementation of various reforms targeted at enhancing efficiency in the delivery of public services. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of the Economic Recovery Program that's also supported by the International Monetary Fund is fully on track. The IMF program has 4 key objectives. First, scaling up the COVID-19 response by supporting health and other sectors most impacted by the pandemic. Second, reducing debt vulnerabilities by pursuing a revenue-driven fiscal consolidation plan that targets to stabilize debt to GDP ratio and subsequently put it on a downward level. Third, supporting the structural and governance reforms while addressing weaknesses in state-owned enterprises with a view to enhancing efficiency in the management of economic and fiscal affairs. And fourth, implementing specific measures to strengthen the monetary policy framework and support financial stability. Mr. Speaker, alongside the aforementioned, the government has continued with the implementation of various stimulus programs to manage COVID-19 pandemic, support businesses, and general employment in order to minimize the adverse socio-economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, in the financial year 2021-2022, the third phase of the economic stimulus program and the implementation targeted, 1, the Kazi Mtaani program to create employment for over 200,000 youths across the country. 2, preparation of the education sector for the transition in the competency-based curriculum by considering new classrooms to accommodate more than 1 million people expected to join junior secondary schools in January 2023. 3, construction of additional 50 new level 3 hospitals in uncovered and densely populated areas across the country to enhance access to medical services. 4, supporting livelihoods of farmers within the sugar belt, provision of fertilizer subsidy to small-scale tea farmers, and completion of the ongoing intervention in the COVID subsector. And 5, supporting communities affected by drought in arid and semi-arid regions of the country. Mr. Speaker, in this statement, I'll be proposing additional allocation to various activities under the economic stimulus program to further support livelihoods and stimulate economic activities. Mr. Speaker, in this budget, the government will strive to enhance the role of the private sector in the economy, including financing infrastructure projects through the public-private partnership, support micro, small, and medium enterprises by facilitating access to finance, invest in ICT and digital infrastructure to support the use of digital platforms to facilitate e-commerce and efficient delivery of public services, promote and strengthen local and foreign resource mobilization efforts to sustain funding of the identified development projects and programs, improve social protection through targeted policy interventions and programs, to promote local production processes and domestic supply value chains, and lastly, strengthen the monitoring and evaluation system for quality outcomes of the projects. Mr. Speaker, implementation of the socio-economic policies and structural reforms have seen Kenya graduate from a low-income to a middle-income country with an estimated per capita income of Kenya shilling 244,000 in 2021. This is a significant leap of 92.1% from the level of Kenya shilling 127,000 in 2013. Our vision is to achieve the upper middle-income status by 2030 with a minimum per capita income of at least Kenya shilling 453,000. Mr. Speaker, looking back since 2013, when the current government took reign of power, Kenya has achieved monumental milestones, especially at the macroeconomic level. For instance, the economy has grown by 155% from the value of Kenya shilling 5.3 trillion in 2013 to Kenya shilling 13.5 trillion in 2022. 2, a strong economic growth, averaging 4.6%, has been realized over the period, including impressive recovery of 7.6% in 2021 from a contraction of 0.3% in 2020, occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. Third, cumulatively 5.1 million new jobs in both formal and informal sectors were created. Fourthly, the economy has maintained macroeconomic stability with inflation rate within target and interest rates remaining stable. The average annual inflation rate declined from 7.2% in 2013 to 5.7% in 2021. Fifthly, the commercial bank lending to the private sector doubled from Kenya shilling 1.5 trillion to Kenya shilling 3.1 trillion in 2021. Sixth, successfully lengthened the average time to maturity for treasury bonds from 7.4 years in June 2013 to 9 years in March 2022. This has improved the maturity profile of domestic debt and supported refinancing risk mitigation. Seventh, the foreign exchange market has remained stable, with the official foreign exchange reserves increasing from US $6.5 billion or 4.4 months of import cover to US $9.5 billion or 5.6 months of import cover in 2021. The current account deficit improved by dropping from 7.7% of GDP in 2013 to 4.9% of GDP in 2021, effectively supporting the stability of the foreign exchange market. Annual diaspora remittance grew by close to 300% from Kenya shilling 112 billion in 2013 to the current Kenya shilling 436 billion in 2022. Foreign direct investment rose from Kenya shilling 56.7 trillion in 2013 to Kenya shilling 75.1 trillion in 2027. Ordinary revenue collection has more than doubled from Kenya shilling 0.8 trillion in the financial year 2012-2013 to Kenya shilling 1.8 trillion in the financial year 2020-21, and further to Kenya shilling 2 trillion in the financial year 2021-2022. The poverty prevalence rate declined from 36.1% in 2013 to 33.6% in 2019. Mr. Speaker, the ongoing police reforms aimed at protecting lives and enhancing general security of the citizens have significantly improved the ratio of police to citizen, from 1 policeman to 1,000 citizens in 2012 to the current 1 policeman to 462 citizens. With regard to the infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, the government has constructed an additional 10,500 kilometers of tarmac roads spread across the 47 counties, facilitating efficient movement of people and goods, thereby rapidly stimulating economic activities. Mr. Speaker, the completion of the standard gauge railway has not only eased movement of passengers during the period, but also led to the transportation of 17.6 million tons of cargo between 2018 and 2021. During this period, over 6.5 million passengers have used the standard gauge railway. This has had positive effects on the economy, including creation of jobs. Mr. Speaker, within the same period, the government tripled power generation from 1,300 megawatts to the current 3,900 megawatts. Of these, 73% is from green source, thus consolidating Kenya's leading generation of green energy in Africa. This has significantly increased the number of households connected to electricity to more than 8.3 million today, compared to 2.3 million in 2013. Mr. Speaker, the international oil prices have been rapidly rising for close to a year without any sign of easing. Conscious of the adverse impact of the high oil prices on all sectors of the economy, the government has taken deliberate steps to subsidize palm prices through the Petroleum Development Levy Fund. This action has stabilized palm prices and consequently prices of goods and services. The government remains committed to provide adequate resources to mitigate the rising cost of fuel. Mr. Speaker, in its pursuit to increase productivity while staying on the economic transformation trajectory, the government has sustained the pace of investment in all sectors. The agricultural sector remains the largest contributor to our GDP and priority under the Big Four agenda on food and nutrition security. The government has continued to support large-scale production of staple food, expanded irrigation schemes, increased access to agricultural inputs, and supported smallholder farmers to sustainably produce and market various commodities. In addition, the government introduced the warehouse receipt system to reduce post-harvest losses. Mr. Speaker, the price of fertilizer has more than doubled in the last 1 year and is still rising. To safeguard food security in the country, the government has allocated Kenya shilling 3 billion to subsidize farmers during the current planting season. We propose to allocate a further Kenya shilling 2.7 billion in the financial 2022-2023 to cushion the farmers while sustaining food production. Mr. Speaker, to strengthen land and property ownership, the government has issued over 5.3 million title deeds over the last 8 years. The government has also fully digitized land records in Nairobi Registry under the National Land Information Management System, referred to as the SASA program, to improve accessibility of land records and lowering the cost of land transaction. Mr. Speaker, Kenya's emergent oceans and blue economy will remain a key growth engine for the country. It is on course to be among the top 5 key contributors to the Kenyan economy and a game changer in enhancement of the socio-economic fortune of the Kenyans living next to our marine resources. Mr. Speaker, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the government strategy to revive tourism sector has yielded positive results. The earnings from the sector had increased by 74% from Kenya shilling 94 billion in 2013 to Kenya shilling 163.6 billion in 2019. Tourist arrivals had also increased from 1.5 million to 2 million during the same period. In 2020, these numbers significantly declined due to the adverse effects of COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, in the health sector, hospital bed capacity increased from 56,069 in 2013 to 82,291 in 2020. This increase is attributed to over 1,912 new hospitals constructed across the country by the National County Government. Further, the introduction of free maternal health care program, dubbed Linda Mama, initiated in 2016, has led to the decline of maternal mortality rate by 26%. This program, alongside the Beyond Zero campaign led by the First Lady, has significantly contributed to the improvement of maternal health care in the country. Mr. Speaker, to address the growing cancer burden over the last decade, the government has formulated appropriate policies and allocated sufficient resources to guide the delivery of cancer testing and treatment services. Some of these interventions include: 1. Establishment of the National Cancer Institute as an overall coordinating agency; 2. Construction and equipment of comprehensive cancer centers at Kenyatta National Hospital in Mombasa, Nakuru, and Garissa counties; and 3. Support to 10 county referral hospitals to operationalize chemotherapy clinics. Mr. Speaker, to address the quality of education in the country, the government has rolled out radical reforms in the sector that have significantly improved the quality of education in the country. For instance, the investment in the sector has seen the number of primary schools increase from 26,549 to 32,437, and secondary schools from 7,174 to 10,413 between 2012 and 2020. The number of technical and vocational education training institutions also increased from 701 to 2,301 during the same period. As a measure of unprecedented success, transition rate from the primary secondary schools moved from 64.5% in 2012 to the current 100%. In addition, under the radical competence-based curriculum, the plan for the first group to join junior secondary schools in January 2013 is well on course. Mr. Speaker, following the sustained investment in human capital development, Kenya was impressively ranked position 3 in sub-Saharan African region with a human capital index of 0.55 in the year 2020. Mr. Speaker, from 2013 to 2021, the government disbursed Kenya shilling 151.6 billion through the Inua Jamii program support over 1.2 million vulnerable persons, among them orphans, the elderly, and persons living with severe disabilities. Further, the government disbursed Kenya shilling 6.95 billion to support women, youth, and persons with disabilities enterprises through 74,021 groups under the Ways of Fund. Mr. Speaker, to improve efficiency in the delivery of government services, the government initiated and operationalized 52 Huduma centers across the country. In 2014, the government launched the e-Citizen platform, where 350 government services have now been successfully migrated. The platform has since served over 27.2 million customers, while raising Kenya shilling 87.1 billion in revenue for the government. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, the government successfully rolled out implementation of the 2010 Constitution. The 47 county government, independent commissions, and other institutions established by the Constitution were duly operationalized, albeit with huge financial requirement, thereby straining the country's fiscal position. Mr. Speaker, To build on the milestones achieved so far, we'll be implementing the following policy, legal, and institutional reforms to improve the business environment, increase efficiency in public service delivery, and strengthen transparency and accountability in public finance management. Mr. Speaker, the government has continued to implement various reforms in procurement to improve efficiency and transparency, enhance good governance, and promote savings in the procurement process. Among the reforms is the procurement of an end-to-end e-government procurement system, whose pilot phase will commence in July 2022, with a target date for full rollout to all ministries, departments, and agencies in January 2023. Mr. Speaker, on framework contracting, we have submitted to this House for enactment the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Bill 2021. This bill provides for multiple awards where several bidders can be awarded the same contract. Once enacted, it will hasten the delivery of services to citizenry and support local farms, particularly in specialized areas like pharmaceuticals, supply of foodstuffs, and commodity markets. Mr. Speaker, further, we have put together a framework that harmonizes the qualification for supply chain management personnel that clarifies competencies for the various cadres in the supply chain management function. In this respect, I direct all procuring entities to adhere to the requirement of this framework. Mr. Speaker, the government commitment to empowering SMEs owned by women, youth, and persons with disabilities under the Access to Government Procurement Opportunities Program remains firmly on course. In this respect, National Treasury has re-engineered the AGBO portal to enable real-time registration and monitoring. The system has further been linked to other government institutions to facilitate faster verification and reporting. Mr. Speaker, we have undertaken a comprehensive assessment of vulnerabilities in state-owned enterprises. In particular, the in-depth financial evaluations of selected state-owned enterprises, excluding Kenya Airways, that face the largest financial and fiscal risk, revealed a cumulative liquidity gap of shilling 383 billion over the next 5 years. This gap is expected to be covered by undertaking specific policy interventions to improve efficiencies, reduce costs, and increase revenue. Mr. Speaker, in order to enhance the operational and financial efficiency of state-owned enterprises, we shall, first, implement the blueprint on governance reforms, on enforcement and separation of roles and responsibilities among institutions that exercise oversight. Second, fast-track the implementation of government investment management information system and capture, among others, all loan advance to the enterprises. Third, extend the coverage of financial evaluations to other state-owned enterprises to be able to anticipate, quantify, monitor, manage, and mitigate fiscal risk from the state corporations. Mr. Speaker, Kenya Airways plays a major and catalytic role in the economic development of this country. The airline is facing severe cash flow constraints following the global lockdowns triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. The government, as a major shareholder, supporting the restructuring of Kenya Airways to adapt to the challenges facing the aviation industry due to the adverse impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Kenya Airways will be required to trim its network, rationalize frequencies of flights, operate a smaller fleet, and rationalize its staff complement. I'll be proposing a budget allocation to meet the restructuring costs. Mr. Speaker, the government will continue to support the Power and Lighting Company to increase its efficiency while sustaining systematic reduction in tariff to electricity users. The recent 15% tariff reduction by the government has not only brought immediate relief to the consumers, but also led to the realization of broad benefits, including reductions of prices of goods by manufacturers. Mr. Speaker, the Kenyan banking sector is stable and has shown great resilience with strong capital and liquidity buffers built on reforms initiated by the Central Bank of Kenya. A clear demonstration of resilience and recovery of the banking sector from the adverse effects of COVID-19 pandemic was strong capital adequacy and liquidity ratios. As at the end of December 2021, capital adequacy ratio was 19.6%, which was above the minimum requirement of 14.5%, while liquidity ratio was 56.2%, which is also above the 20% requirement. The sector has continued with its transformation journey under the Kenya Banking Sector Charter issued in 2019 by the Central Bank of Kenya. The Charter focuses on strengthening risk-based credit pricing, entrenching customer centricity in the operations, and ensuring ethical culture in the banks. In addition, the Central Bank of Kenya Act 2021 was enacted to provide the central bank with powers to license and oversight the previously unregulated digital credit providers. Mr. Speaker, commercial banks face climate-related risk in their operations. In this regard, the CBK issued a detailed guidelines on climate-related risk management to all commercial banks in October 2021. The banks are now required to integrate climate-related risk into their overall risk management framework. Mr. Speaker, the Fin Access Survey 2021 conducted in the 47 counties revealed that access to formal financial services improved from 82.9% in 2019 to 83.7% in 2021. The increase of 0.8% access through the formal channels was attributed to the progress made by Kenya to expand financial access through various channels, including mobile money financial platforms. Access through the informal channels, on the other hand, reduced from 6.1% to 4.7%, while the excluded population increased slightly from 11% to 11.6% during the same period. Mr. Speaker, over the last 15 years, an elaborate financial service ecosystem in Kenya has evolved from an initial basic money transfer innovation. In this period, access to financial services has increased from 26% of adults in 2006 to the current 83%. Further, the government has rolled out mobile money, strengthened real-time gross settlement system, and established a regional payment system at both the East African Community and COMESA region. In order to strengthen the national payment system, Mr. Speaker, the Central Bank of Kenya in February 2022 launched the National Payment Strategy 2022-2025, which seeks to realize a faster, secure, efficient, and collaborative payment system that supports financial inclusion and innovation, while reinforcing the emergence of 24-hour economy. Mr. Speaker, in order to attract increased financing and investment in Kenya, the Nairobi International Financial System Authority has put in place the required operating framework and regulations. With the necessary framework now in place and the official opening slated later in the year, NIFCA will be expected to be a key catalyst in supporting the economic growth. Mr. Speaker, the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company continues to play a leading role in the delivery of affordable housing in Kenya. I am pleased to note that since September 2020, KMRC has disbursed over $2 billion to 7 primary mortgage lenders and is currently processing an additional $7 billion. To provide a sustainable source of funding and to complement the existing credit lines, the company whose bond was recently listed at the Nairobi Security Exchange successfully issued its first corporate bond of Kenya shilling 1.4 billion under the medium-term note program of Kenya shilling 10.5 billion. Mr. Speaker, since the launch of the Credit Guarantee Scheme in December 2020, total loans extended to micro, small, and medium enterprises under this scheme had surpassed Kenya shilling 2.2 billion by December 2021. This has expanded access to affordable credit to micro, small, and medium enterprises to 45 counties across 11 different sectors of the economy. To enhance coverage of the scheme, additional participating financial intermediaries will be brought on board. Further, the government will seek support of development partners to increase the scheme's capital from the current Kenya shilling 4 billion to Kenya shilling 10 billion over the medium term. Mr. Speaker, to deepen capital markets, the government is undertaking a review of the legal and regulatory framework to address emerging issues in the capital market space. These include, among others, aspects on collective investment schemes and investment-based crowdfunding. In addition, the government is installing a new central security depository system at the Central Bank of Kenya to support planned reforms in the secondary trading of government bonds. Mr. Speaker, to enable more investment advisors offer investment advisory services, I propose to amend the Capital Markets Act to expand the spectrum of persons who can act as investment advisors. This will allow single director companies and partnerships to be licensed as investment advisors. Mr. Speaker, the payroll of the public service pension continues to grow and had more than 300,000 pensioners and dependents as of December 2021. The National Treasury will roll out the much-awaited re-engineered pension management system in the course of the financial year. The system will offer an end-to-end enterprise resource planning solution in the management and processing of pension benefits. Mr. Speaker, the Public Service Superannuation Scheme that was operationalized in January 2021 has attracted more than 352,000 members with a current fund value of shilling 27 billion. The scheme is eventually expected to ease pressure on the pension wage bill while guaranteeing sustainability of public service pension. Mr. Speaker, to further improve the pension policy framework, the National Treasury is developing an overarching national pension policy that sets the guiding principles for application across board on structuring and management of retirement benefits for public servants. In order to widen the scope of investment, where pension schemes can invest their funds, Mr. Speaker, I propose to amend the retirement benefits investment guidelines to include the unlisted real estate investment trust incorporated in Kenya that are approved by the Capital Markets Authority. Mr. Speaker, the much-awaited government-backed pension scheme for informal sector workers, Kenya National Entrepreneur Saving Trust, KENEST, targeting 15 million marginalized informal sector workers, has now been registered. To operationalize the scheme, the government is restructuring the M-Akiba bond platform for safe and secure investment for the unique, heterogeneous informal workers. To this effect, the National Treasury is working with stakeholders in the financial sector to roll out the scheme across the 47 counties in the course of this financial year. Mr. Speaker, in the recent times, motorcycles and three-wheelers have increasingly been engaged in commercial fare-paying passengers business. Unfortunately, the number of accidents in this category of business have been on a steady rise, yet the owners of motorcycles do not have insurance cover to cater for any treatment in case of injuries or compensation in case of death or any other damages caused by an accident involving motorcycles. In this respect, I propose to amend the insurance regulations to require motorcycles and three-wheelers used by fare-paying passengers to take insurance for their passengers. Mr. Speaker, in an effort to strengthen disaster risk management in the country, the government will fast-track the enactment of the disaster risk management policy and bill, finalize the disaster risk management strategy, and update the disaster risk financing strategy. In addition, the National Treasury will expedite the finalization of Public Finance Management Regulation 2022. Mr. Speaker, in order to demonstrate our commitment in addressing climate change, the government will implement the Financing Locally Led Climate Action Program, a 10-year financing program aimed at mobilizing climate finances to support local communities build their resilience and adapt to the impacts of climate change in 47 counties. In the financial year 2022-2023, I propose to allocate Kenya shilling 6.1 billion to this program. Mr. Speaker, in addition, the government has finalized the long-term low-emission strategy to guide a low-carbon, climate-resilient development path. To address the financing challenge of climate change actions, the government will develop a climate finance mobilization strategy. Further, in order to promote private sector investments in green projects and programs, the government will fast-track the finalization of the national policy framework on green fiscal incentives and development of the carbon mechanism design. In the forestry sector, the government is committed to expand the country's tree cover from the current 7.2% to the 10% target. The government is revitalizing efforts to meet this important target through resource mobilization with partners and engagement with the counties to dedicate more areas and resources under the forestry regimes, as well as tackling the catchment degradation that has contributed to the rising lakes phenomenon. In this regard, I propose to allocate Kenya shilling 10.2 billion to support conservation of forests and water towers. Mr. Speaker, in order to encourage reporting and recovery of identified assets by the Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority, I propose to amend the Unclaimed Finance Assets Act to provide for waiver of penalties, fines, and audit fees in justifiable circumstances, as well as to cap accumulation of penalties and interest to the value of the assets. I also propose a 12-month voluntary disclosure program to to grant relief or penalties on the unclaimed financial assets declared and delivered in the next 12 months under the program. Mr. Speaker, Article 173 of our Constitution established a judiciary fund, which will be administered by the Chief Registrar in meeting the administrative expenses of the judiciary. In this respect, the necessary procedures for operationalization of the fund have been put in place. In particular, the following have so far been achieved. 1, the Judiciary Fund Act and regulations have been enacted. 2, the bank accounts for the fund have been opened at the Central Bank of Kenya. 3, an appropriate budget for judiciary in the financial year 2022-2023 has been created. And 4, if means has been enhanced to accommodate judiciary fund operation. This fund will be fully operational with effect from 1st July 2022. Mr. Speaker, the fiscal policy supporting the budget for the financial year 2022-23 and also the medium term is designed to accelerate economic recovery for improved livelihood for Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, as mentioned earlier, one of the objectives of our economic recovery program is to reduce the debt vulnerabilities by pursuing a revenue-driven fiscal consolidation. In this regard, the government has developed a draft national tax policy to guide tax administration that will soon be shared with stakeholders and peer review institutions for input. Further, the government is developing a medium-term revenue strategy to boost tax revenues, improve the tax system, and link taxation to our development needs over the medium term. Mr. Speaker, in addition, the government will continue to rationalize tax expenditures and retain those whose intention is to promote investment and ensure sustainability and value for money from our resources. In the tax expenditure report 2021, we noted a significant decline in the level of tax expenditure from 5.17% of GDP in 2017 to 2.96% as a percentage of GDP in 2020. We shall continue to review the existing tax expenditure in order to boost the tax revenue. Mr. Speaker, we project total revenue collection, including appropriation in aid and grants for the financial year 2022-2023 budget, to be Kenya shilling 2.4 trillion, equivalent to 17.5% of GDP. Of this, ordinary revenue is projected at Kenya shilling 2.14 trillion, equivalent to 15.3% of GDP. On the other hand, Mr. Speaker, total expenditure in the financial year 2022-2023 is projected at Kenya shilling 3.3 trillion, equivalent to 23.9% of GDP. Recurrent expenditure will amount to Kenya shilling 2.2 trillion, while development expenditure, including allocation to foreign finance projects, contingency fund, and conditional transfers to county government, is Kenya shilling 715.5 billion. The funding is expected to accelerate completion of ongoing infrastructure projects. The equitable share to counties is projected at Kenya shilling 370 billion. Mr. Speaker, given the projected revenues and grants against the projected expenditure, the fiscal deficit is projected to decline to Kenya shilling 862.5 billion, equivalent to 6.2% of GDP in the financial year 2022-2023, from Kenya shilling 1 trillion 24 billion, equivalent to 8.1% of GDP in the financial year 2021-2022. The fiscal deficit will be financed through net external financing of Kenya shilling 280 billion, equivalent to 2% of GDP, and net domestic financing of Kenya shilling 581 billion, equivalent to 4.2% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, our medium-term fiscal consolidation policy targets to progressively reduce the level of fiscal deficit from Kenya shilling 862 billion, equivalent 6.2% of GDP in the financial year 2022-2023, to Kenya shilling 634.1 billion, equivalent 3.2% of GDP in the financial year 2025-26. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has implemented reforms in public debt management to strengthen debt transparency and accountability. The depth of coverage and disclosures on public debt information has been enhanced in line with the best practices. A broad range of information on public debt is readily available to the general public on the National Treasury website, while an investor relations unit within the Public Debt Management Office facilitates investor, lender, and public engagements on public debt issues. Mr. Speaker, Kenya's debt carrying capacity is rated moderate, and the overall public debt is sustainable. We have initiated implementation of a set of measures to lower cost and risk in the public debt portfolio. These measures include cancellation of some non-disbursing external loans, rearrangements of syndicated external loans, and increasing the issuance of treasury bonds to lengthen the maturity structure and improve debt sustainability indicators. The preferred debt financing are highly concessional loans offered at below market interest rates with long repayment period. Recourse to commercial borrowing has been maintained at minimum levels. Mr. Speaker, the current legal numerical public debt ceiling has constrained public funding of projects while at the same time failing to consider the effects of external shocks on the economy. In this regard, we propose to replace the debt ceiling with a debt anchor and set it at 55% of debt to GDP in present value terms. This is in line with internationally accepted conventional practice. Further, we provided a requirement that the Cabinet Secretary National Treasury reports to Parliament whenever the debt level swings beyond the threshold with time-bound remedial actions. This approach ensures that debt remains within sustainable levels and entrenches accountability and transparency in public debt management. I have forwarded to this August House the necessary changes to the PFM marks to align ourselves with this desired position and request that the House consider it favorably. Mr. Speaker, the Public-Private Partnership Program has gained traction, and under the new PPP Act 2021 that has reduced the number of approval processes, introduced timelines, and strengthened the institutional framework by elevating the PPP unit to a directorate in the National Treasury. So far, the government has achieved closure on a number of projects, of which a key one seeks to deliver over 4,000 housing units to frontline Kenya Defence Force personnel. Mr. Speaker, to ensure projects with the highest socioeconomic returns are selected and implemented, we are putting in place a joint public investment management and public-private partnership planning framework and strengthening the coordination between the Public Debt Management Office and the Public-Private Partnership Directorate for effective control of fiscal exposure, as envisioned the new PPP Act 2021. Further, the government will fully operationalize the Public-Private Partnership Project Facilitation Fund to support activities of the PPP Directorate and those of the contracting authorities in preparation phase of a project during the tendering process and project appraisal. Mr. Speaker, in view of the limited fiscal space, the government will embark on rationalizing the existing portfolio of projects being implemented by the national government and issue regulations for managing public investment. The government has developed the Public Investment Management Information System, which is expected to be a repository of all projects implemented by the national and county governments. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to the highlights of the government's spending priorities in the coming financial year. In light of the revenue challenges and significant expenditure demands, spending in the financial 2022-2023 will focus on supporting economic recovery and the Big Four agenda to ensure the highest impact on the well-being of Kenyans. The proposed total program spending for the financial year 2022-2023 amounts to Kenya shilling 3.3 trillion. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, the government is implementing the third economic stimulus program of Kenya shilling 30.1 billion to accelerate the pace of economic growth and sustain the gains realized so far. To further enhance the ongoing interventions, I propose a total of Kenya shilling 20.6 billion in this budget support implementation of various activities. Mr. Speaker, out of this, Kenya shilling 2.1 billion is for the youth empowerment and employment creation under the Kazi Mutani program, Kenya shilling 8.2 billion for improving educational outcomes, Kenya shilling 1.3 billion for improving health outcomes, Kenya shilling 5.8 billion for improving environment, water and sanitation facilities, Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for fertilizer subsidy and Kenya shilling 1.6 billion for enhancing liquidity to business. Mr. Speaker, to support implementation of the projects and programs under the Big Four agenda, I have proposed a total of Kenya shilling 146.8 billion. Mr. Speaker, we have continued to strengthen our healthcare systems in our quest for universal health coverage. Better health outcomes depend on the availability, accessibility, and capacity of health workers to deliver quality services anchored on well-equipped and provisioned healthcare facilities. Towards this end, the government has implemented various initiatives laying ground for achieving the goal of 100% health insurance coverage. Key among these initiatives include the free maternity program dubbed Linda Mama, which currently benefits over 1 million mothers annually, increasing the total number of health workers in the public and private sector, investment in the health infrastructure, and development of a digital health platform to support effective monitoring of the health sector. In addition, the government enacted the NHIF Amendment Act, which provides for the establishment of a centralized healthcare provider management system to ensure efficient management and payment of claims, as well as data collection. Mr. Speaker, to further enhance realization of the universal health coverage, I propose to allocate Kenya shilling 146.8 billion to the healthcare sector to support the various programs aimed at improving healthcare outcomes. Of this amount, Kenya shilling 62.3 billion will fund activities and programs for the attainment of universal health coverage. Specific allocation for various activities and programs include Kenya shilling 7 billion for purchase of COVID vaccines and related expenditure, Kenya shilling 4.1 billion for free maternity health care, Kenya shilling 5.2 billion for the managed equipment services, as well as Kenya shilling 1.8 billion to provide medical cover for the elderly and severely disabled persons in our society. Mr. Speaker, to lower cases of HIV/AIDS, malaria and tuberculosis in the country, Kenya shilling 16.2 billion has been recommended for the purpose. To enhance vaccines and immunization program, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 5.2 billion. Mr. Speaker, to further improve health service delivery, Kenya shilling 18.1 billion has been proposed for the Kenyatta National Hospital, Kenya shilling 11.7 billion for the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, Kenya shilling 7.7 billion for the Kenya Medical Training Center, Kenya shilling 2.9 billion for the Kenya Medical Research Institute, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for the construction of Kenya National Hospital Burns and Pediatric Center, Kenya shilling 1.2 billion for procurement of family planning and reproductive healthcare communities, Kenya shilling 300 million for procurement of cyberknife radiotherapy equipment, Kenya shilling 1.3 billion for the construction of cancer center at Kisii Level 5 Hospital, and Kenya shilling 619 million for the procurement of equipment at the National Blood Transfusion Services. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, the government embarked on a plan to provide decent and affordable houses for Kenyans. This was envisaged to create additional jobs, provide market for manufacturers as well as suppliers, and raise the contribution of real estate and construction sector to GDP. To achieve this, government has been implementing policy and administrative reforms targeted at lowering the cost of construction and improving access to finance for affordable housing. The government has also mobilized resources to support construction of affordable housing units and social housing units. Building on the gains and to ensure success of this initiative, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 27.7 billion for the affordable housing program. The proposed allocation includes Kenya shilling 4.6 billion to Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company for enhancement of the company's capital, as well as for on lending to primary mortgage lenders, Kenya shilling 8.7 billion for construction of affordable housing units, as well as Kenya shilling 1.2 billion for construction of social housing units. Mr. Speaker, to support the Nairobi Metropolitan Services in reversing urban indignity in Nairobi County, Kenya shilling 200 million has been recommended for the Nairobi Metropolitan Services Improvement Project, and Kenya shilling 118.7 million for construction of footbridges. Other key allocations to the housing, urban development, and public works sector include Kenya shilling 5.9 billion for the Kenya Informal Settlement Development Project 2, Kenya shilling 700 million for construction of markets, Kenya shilling 1 billion for maintenance of government pool houses, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for the construction of housing unit for the National Police and Kenya Prison, Kenya shilling 700 million for the Kenya Urban Program. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 1.2 billion to support the Nairobi Bus Rapid Transport Project to offer an efficient and time-saving public transport. Mr. Speaker, implementation of the appropriate policies coupled with enhanced investments in the manufacturing sector has created a conducive business environment to support and protect local industries, generation of jobs and improve livelihoods. Mr. Speaker, to further promote local industries, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 10.1 billion under the various implementing ministries, departments and agencies. Out of these, Kenya shilling 1 billion will go to the Credit Guarantee Scheme to enhance access to affordable credit by micro, small and medium enterprises in the manufacturing sector. And Kenya shilling 626 million for provision of finances to micro, small and medium enterprises through the Kenya Industrial Estate. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed Kenya shilling 2.6 billion for Dongo Kundu Special Economic Zone, Kenya shilling 295 million for the development of the Special Economic Zone, Textile Park in Naivasha, Kenani Leather Industry Park, and at the River Textile Hub, Kenya shilling 50 million for the Freeport and Industrial Park Special Economic Zone in Mombasa. Other proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 410.4 million for the modernization of Rivertex and Kenya shilling 3 billion for supporting access to finance and enterprise recovery. Mr. Speaker, in order to maximize the benefits from our cash crop, the government will make further investment towards the revival and enhancement of output. In this respect, Mr. Speaker, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 212.1 million for modernization of cooperative cotton ginneries and a further Kenya shilling 250 million for cotton industry revitalization. Mr. Speaker, to equip our youth with essential training and internship opportunities, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 1.3 billion for the Kenya Industrial and Entrepreneurship Project, Kenya shilling 2.1 billion for the Kenya Youth Employment and Opportunities Project, Kenya shilling 500 million for industrial research laboratories, Kenya shilling 200 million for constituency industrial development centers. Mr. Speaker, as part of the Big Four agenda, the government is implementing measures and interventions to achieve food and nutrition security for all Kenyans. These measures include supporting large-scale production of staple food, expanding irrigation schemes, increasing access to agricultural inputs, and supporting smallholder farmers to sustainably produce and market various commodities. To further support programs under this pillar, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 46.7 billion in this budget. Out of this, Kenya shilling 4.2 billion will go to the National Agricultural and Rural Inclusivity Project, Kenya shilling 1.7 billion for the Kenya Cereal Enhancement Program, Kenya shilling 1.9 billion has been proposed for the Emergency Locust Response, Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for the National Value Chain Support Program, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for the Agricultural Sector Development Support Program 2, Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for the Small Scale Irrigation and Value Addition Project, and Kenya shilling 690 million for Food Security and Crop Diversification Project. Mr. Speaker, the government will further set aside Kenya shilling 2.7 billion for fertilizer subsidy to cushion farmers during the short rain from October to December 2022. This is in addition to the Kenya shilling 3 billion allocated in the financial 2021-2022. Mr. Speaker, to improve livestock production, I propose Kenya shilling 500 million for free disease holding ground in Lamu. I also propose Kenya shilling 1.7 billion for the Kenya Livestock Commercialization Program and Kenya shilling 121 million for livestock production under Big Four initiative. Mr. Speaker, to promote sustainable utilization of the blue economy resources, I have proposed an allocation of 1.9 billion for the Aquaculture Business Development Project, Kenya shilling 2.8 billion for Kenya Marine Fisheries and Socio-Economic Development Project, Kenya shilling 1.3 billion for exploitation of living resources under the blue economy, Kenya shilling 1 billion for construction of fish processing plant in Lamu, Kenya shilling 270 million for coastal fisheries infrastructure development, Kenya shilling 210 million for rehabilitation of fish landing sites in Lake Victoria, Kenya shilling 204 million for aquaculture technology development and innovation transfers, and Kenya shilling 126.3 million for the development of the Blue Economy Initiative. Mr. Speaker, in order to increase agricultural production and enhance resilience to climate change risk in targeted smallholder farming and pastoral communities in Kenya, I have set aside Kenya shilling 147 million for the Climate Smart Agricultural Productivity Project, Kenya shilling 850 million to enhance drought resilience and sustainable livelihood, Kenya shilling 178 million towards ending drought emergencies in Kenya, and in addition, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 421 million for the livestock and crop insurance scheme to reduce the vulnerabilities of Kenyan farmers to diseases and natural disasters. Mr. Speaker, to ensure legitimacy of land ownership, I have recommended Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for processing and registration of title deeds, Kenya shilling 769 million for digitization of land registries, and Kenya shilling 130 million for construction of land registries. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 90 million for revitalization of cotton industry, Kenya shilling 300 million for mitigation of fall armyworms, Kenya shilling 200 million for establishment of liquid nitrogen plant, Kenya shilling 200 million towards the embryo transfer project, and Kenya shilling 250 million for construction and refurbishment of the Leather Science Institute. Mr. Speaker, having highlighted expenditures under the Economic Stimulus Program and the Big Four agenda initiatives, I now turn to other proposed areas of expenditure in this budget that will support our path to sustainable and resilient economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to expand critical infrastructure in roads, rails, air, and seaports to create an enabling environment for economic recovery and employment creation. Towards this, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 212.5 billion to support construction of roads and bridges, as well as their rehabilitation and maintenance. Mr. Speaker, the standard gauge railway has presented a modern and efficient transport system that is safe, comfortable, and affordable for passengers and freights. To expand railway transport to the rest of the country, I have proposed Kenya shilling 18.5 billion for development of the standard gauge railway, Kenya shilling 1.1 billion for railways metro lines, Kenya shilling 439 million for rehabilitation of locomotives, and Kenya shilling 264 million for development of ERP system for SGR. Mr. Speaker, to support production of reliable and affordable energy, I propose a total of shilling 91.5 billion, excluding the provision set aside under the Big Four agenda initiatives. Out of this, shilling 62.9 billion will cater for transmission and distribution of power, shilling 18.5 billion for development of geothermal energy, shilling 9.3 billion for electrification of public facilities, and shilling 2 billion for development of nuclear energy, as well as exploration and mining of coal. Mr. Speaker, the security of our nation remains paramount and must be maintained to safeguard the considerable development gains. For this reason, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 317.8 billion to support operations of the National Police Service, Defense, and the National Intelligence Services. Mr. Speaker, the proposed allocations include shilling 128.4 billion for Defense, shilling 46.4 billion for the National Intelligence Service, and shilling 122.2 billion for Police and Prison Service, shilling 10.7 billion for leasing of police motor vehicles, and shilling 1 billion for Police Modernization Program, shilling 1 billion for the National Communication and Surveillance System, and shilling 335 million for the equipment of the National Forensic Laboratory. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations include shilling 4.8 billion for medical insurance for the National Police Service and Prison, shilling 2.2 billion for the group personal insurance for the National Police Service and Prisons, as well as shilling 1 billion for the National Integrated Identity Management System. Mr. Speaker, we are committed to provide access to quality education for our children and youth. This will indeed facilitate realization of their full potential and enable them effectively contribute to the development of the country. The allocation and efficiency in spending on education has been increased to improve outcomes. As a result, access to education at all levels has improved remarkably, as evidenced by the increased enrollment in the basic and tertiary institutions. To further improve education outcomes, I propose a total of shilling 544.4 billion to support programs in the education sector. Mr. Speaker, out of the proposed allocation, shilling 12 billion will cater for free primary education, shilling 2.5 billion for recruitment of teachers, shilling 64.4 billion for free day secondary school education, including insurance under the NHI for secondary school students, shilling 5 billion for examination fees waiver for grade 6, class 8, and Form 4 candidates, and shilling 1.96 billion for the school feeding program. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 1.2 billion for training of teachers on competency-based curriculum, and shilling 310 million for the digital literacy program and ICT integration in our secondary schools. Mr. Speaker, to support transition from primary education to junior secondary school education under the competency-based curriculum, shilling 4 billion has been set aside for the construction of classrooms to support school infrastructure development and ensure safe learning in our schools. I have proposed allocation of 2.8 billion for primary and secondary schools infrastructure, and shilling 1.8 billion for construction and equipping of technical training institutes and vocational training centers. Further, shilling 1.1 billion has been set aside to increase access and improve the quality of technical and vocational education and training programs under the East African Skills Transformation and Regional Integration Project. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocation in the education sector includes shilling 294.7 billion to Teachers Service Commission, shilling 91.2 billion for university education, shilling 15.8 billion to the Higher Education Loans Board, shilling 6.8 billion for Kenya Secondary School Education Quality, and shilling 5.2 billion capitation for TVET students. Further, shilling 527 million has been set aside for technical vocational education, training, and entrepreneurship. Shilling 971 million for promotion of youth employment and vocational training, and shilling 323 million for the National Research Fund. Mr. Speaker, unleashing the productive potential of people living in poverty involves the removal of constraints through economic inclusion programs. In this respect, the government continues to support vulnerable groups through the Social Safety Net program, famously referred to as Inua Jamii. To continue protecting this vulnerable segment, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 39.5 billion for social protection and affirmative actions in this budget. Mr. Speaker, out of this allocation, shilling 933.8 million will go to the Child Welfare Society of Kenya, and shilling 400 million for the Presidential Bursary for the Orphans, and shilling 459 million for the National Development Fund for persons living with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, we acknowledge and support the critical role that youth and women play in nation building. The need for full and equal participation of youth and women across all spheres of the economy needs to be accelerated and sustained. To further empower the youth and support business owned by the youth, women, and persons living with disabilities, I have recommended shilling 13.1 billion for the National Youth Service, shilling 2.2 billion for the Kenya Youth Empowerment and Opportunities Project, shilling 175 million for the Youth Enterprise Fund, Development Fund, shilling 170 million for the Women Enterprise Fund, and shilling 92 million for the Youth Empowerment and Enterprise Fund. Mr. Speaker, to promote regional equity, reduce poverty, and enhance social development, I have proposed shilling 444.3 billion for the National Government Constituency Development Fund. Kenya shilling 2.1 billion for the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, as well as Kenya shilling 7.1 billion for the Equalization Fund to finance programs in the previously marginalized areas. Mr. Speaker, we recognize the great opportunities that digital technologies offer in various sectors of the economy. Efficiently deployed, digital technologies have strong potential to accelerate economic recovery and improve livelihoods at relatively low cost for sustainable and inclusive development. For this reason, we have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 15.6 billion to fund initiatives in the information, communication, and technology sector. Specifically, this allocation includes Kenya shilling 620 million for government shared services. Mr. Speaker, the government is investing in the development of the Konza National Data Center and Smart City facilities. This National Data Center was commissioned in July 2021 and is currently hosting client services, including government agencies, and is a platform for the acceleration of innovation, particularly among the youth in Kenya. We encourage all MDAs to take advantage of this modern facility. Mr. Speaker, to fast-track the development of the Konza Technopolis City, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 5.2 billion for the horizontal infrastructure phase 1 and Kenya shilling 3.8 billion for Konza Data Center and Smart City facilities. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations include Kenya shilling 2.7 billion for maintenance and rehabilitation of last-mile connectivity network, Kenya shilling 1.2 billion for maintenance and rehabilitation of the National Optic Fiber Backbone Phase 2 expansion cable, and Kenya shilling 1.4 billion for installation and commissioning of Eldoret-Nadapal fiber optic cable. Mr. Speaker, to further support sports development and tourism recovery, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 15.8 billion for the Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund, Kenya shilling 3.2 billion for the Tourism Fund, Kenya shilling 1.8 billion for Tourism Promotion Fund, and Kenya shilling 125 million for refurbishment of the regional stadium. Mr. Speaker, environmental protection and access to adequate supply of clean water is fundamental for the achievement of the socio-economic development envisioned by the Kenya Vision 2030. To expand access to clean and adequate water for domestic and agricultural use, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 45.9 billion for water and sewerage infrastructure development, Kenya shilling 16 billion for water resource management, and Kenya shilling 9.8 billion for water storage and flood control. In addition, I have set aside Kenya shilling 8.5 billion for irrigation and land reclamation, and Kenya shilling 2.1 billion for water harvesting and storage for irrigation. Mr. Speaker, in order to support environment and water conservation, I propose to set aside Kenya shilling 10.2 billion for forest and water towers conservation, Kenya shilling 3.1 billion for environment management and protection, Kenya shilling 1.5 billion for meteorological services, and Kenya shilling 7 billion for wildlife conservation and management. Mr. Speaker, stronger institutions and effective policy implementation and management of resource improve service delivery, transparency, and accountability. We shall continue to seek better public service delivery by building and sustaining strong, efficient, and accountable institutions. In order to enhance good governance and scale up our fight against corruption, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 3.6 billion for the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Kenya shilling 3.4 billion for the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, Kenya shilling 8.4 billion for the Criminal Investigation Department Services, and Kenya shilling 6.4 billion for the Office of the Auditor General. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, to enhance the oversight and legislative role of Parliament and access to justice, I propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 50.2 billion to Parliament and Kenya shilling 18.9 billion to the Judiciary. Mr. Speaker, in order to facilitate the 2022 general elections, we allocated Kenya shilling 22.9 billion in the current financial year 2021-2022, and I further propose an allocation of Kenya shilling 21.7 billion in the financial year 2022-2023 to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Mr. Speaker, The county governments will receive a proposed allocation of Kenya shilling 370 billion as equitable share in the financial 2022-2023. These represent 27.3% of the most recent audited and approved revenue raised nationally. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the equitable share of revenue raised nationally, the county governments will receive recommended conditional allocations amounting to Kenya shilling 37.1 billion, bringing the total allocation of the county governments in the financial 2022-2023 to Kenya shilling 407 billion. Mr. Speaker, we have also complied with the High Court ruling on conditional grants to county government. In this regard, conditional grants have now been excluded from the Division of Revenue Bill 2022, unlike in the case of last financial year. I note with appreciation that this House has unlocked the stalemate on the county government's grant bills. This bill will provide a legal framework for transferring conditional grants to the county government, transfer of functions between national county government. Mr. Speaker, in order to ensure that the process of transfer of functions between the national county government is clearly provided for in law, we are developing a legislation to operationalize Article 187 and 189 of the Constitution on transfer of functions and cooperation between the national and the county government. The proposed legislative framework will provide transparency in the administration of intergovernmental transfers in respect of transferred functions and cooperations between government. Once completed, the legislative proposal will be submitted to this Honorable House for consideration and approval. Mr. Speaker, in order to support county governments' efforts to enhance their own source revenue, the National Treasury has submitted the county government bill, revenue raising process bill, to this August House. The bill will regulate the manner in which counties introduce or vary fees and charges. Once passed, this legislation will address the problem of multiplicity of fees and charges within and across counties, in line with Article 209, subsection 5 of the Constitution. I call upon honourable members to consider and approve this bill in a bid to create a conducive environment for business and deal with the issue of multiplicity of fees and charges within the county government. Mr. Speaker, in order to support an implementation of the county government's own source revenue policy, the National Treasury is in collaboration with the Ministry of Land and Fiscal Planning, Council of Governors, and other stakeholders have developed the National Rating Bill 2022 to replace the outdated Valuation for Rating Act, Cap 266 and Cap 267. This bill was submitted to this Parliament in January 2022, and once enacted will guide valuation for rating and imposition of rates on rateable property. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has a wealth of mineral deposits. From the financial year 2016-17 and 2019-20, the government collected a total of shilling 5.5 billion in royalties from extractive activities. These amounts translate to an average of shilling 1.4 billion annually. Although mineral royalties are currently being received from 15 counties, 91% of the payments are derived from extractive activities in only 3 counties, namely Kilifi, Kwale, and Kajiado. Mr. Speaker, following a presidential directive, the National Treasury has since developed a draft framework which provides for mechanisms for sharing of revenue from mineral royalties among the national government, county governments, and communities in line with Section 183 of the Mining Act 2016. The framework, which is currently being subject to the stakeholder consultation, will provide basis for ensuring that revenues raised from the mineral royalties trickle down to the county government and communities where mining is taking place. Mr. Speaker, in line with Article 204, subsection 1 of the Constitution of Kenya, county governments have been allocated shilling 7.1 billion under the Equalization Fund in the financial year 2022-23, which represents 0.55% of the most recent audited accounts of revenue received. Mr. Speaker, following the High Court ruling on the petition number 272, of 2016 or 5th November 2019, quashing the guidelines of administration of equalization fund and ensuing disbandment of the fund's advisory board, all expenditures of the fund were stopped. To mitigate this, Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury, in collaboration with other stakeholders, developed the PFM regulations 2021, which was approved by Parliament in October 2021. Mr. Speaker, following the appointment of the advisory board and establishment of the secretariat, it is expected that completion of projects as identified under the first policy and the implementation of the programs in the second and subsequent policies will now be fast-tracked. Mr. Speaker, continued delays in payment of pending bills to entities that provide goods and services to both national and county government have affected liquidity and operation of these entities. In a number of cases, this has led to closure of businesses, affecting livelihoods of the suppliers. Though some progress was noted in the settlement of these pending bills by the national county government, we still have challenges where a number of suppliers are owed large amounts of money. In this regard, I direct government ministries, departments and agencies, as well as the county governments, to clear all their pending bills by 30th June 2022. In addition, we call upon all the MDAs and county governments to avoid accumulation of pending bills and ensure that payments are made as and when due. Mr. Speaker, I now want to highlight the tax policy measures for the financial 2022-23 budget, which are contained in the Finance Bill 2022. I will also highlight custom measures that Kenya will be presenting for consideration by the East African Community Ministers responsible for finance and economic affairs in their pre-budget consultation plan for May this year. These custom measures will become effective from 1st July 2022. Mr. Speaker, the proposed measures contained in the Finance Bill 2022 are expected to generate an additional shilling 50.4 billion to the exchequer for the financial 2022-2023 budget. Mr. Speaker, as earlier indicated in this statement, we consulted other partner states in the East African community, and Kenya was allowed to present its budget statement earlier than the other partner states. With regards to customs measures, we have evaluated various proposals that we intend to submit for consideration during the East African Community pre-budget consultation by the EAC Ministers for Finance, which will be held later in May this year. The measures that will be agreed upon will be communicated through the EAC Gazette and implemented from 1st July this year. Mr. Speaker, these measures are generally meant to promote our manufacturing sector and enhance our exports by making inputs and raw materials used in the manufacture of goods more affordable, hence lowering the cost of production. In addition, some of the measures are aimed at enhancing the competitiveness of locally manufactured goods through protection from unfair competition by imported goods. Some of the custom measures are also geared towards protecting of critical sectors of our economy, like agriculture, from unfair competition occasioned by importation of products that can be produced by our gallant farmers. In cases where local production does not meet our demand, the government will ensure the deficit is met in an orderly manner that does not adversely affect our farmers. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the proposed amendments under the Value Added Tax Act. The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing socio-economic implications on Kenyans continue to impose a heavy burden on our health sector. In this regard, I have proposed more incentives to the sector by exempting from VAT plant and machinery for use by manufacturers of pharmaceutical products. Mr. Speaker, the government has been progressively addressing the cost of health care in the country so as to expand access to quality and affordable healthcare services. To further reduce the healthcare costs, I propose to exempt from VAT medical oxygen supplied to registered hospitals, urine bags, adult diapers, artificial breasts, and colostomy or ileostomy bags for medical use. Mr. Speaker, assembly of motor vehicles and manufacture of motor vehicle parts locally has gained traction in order to encourage more investment, especially in the manufacture of passenger motor vehicles locally. I propose to exempt from VAT inputs and raw materials used in the manufacture of passenger motor vehicles. Additionally, I propose to exempt locally manufactured passenger motor vehicles from VAT. Mr. Speaker, charitable organizations play an important role of supporting the vulnerable members of the society. Currently, entities that make cash donations to charitable organizations that are registered under either the Societies Act or the Non-Governmental Organization Coordination Act are allowed to deduct the cash donations from their taxable income. However, entities that donate cash to charitable organizations that are not registered under the two acts are not allowed to deduct such donations from their taxable income. To address this challenge, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to allow all entities that donate cash to charitable organizations to deduct the donations from their taxable income. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has witnessed significant growth in the use of financial derivatives, including hedging, futures, and options. However, there is no provision in the Income Tax Act to charge the gains accruing from the financial derivatives to non-residents. To ensure equity and fairness, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to provide for the taxation of gains accruing to the non-residents for the transaction involving financial derivatives in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, last year, the Income Tax Act was amended to replace the previously thin capitation rule for determining taxable income with a method that restricts interest based on a ratio of earning before interest, taxes, depreciation, and harmonization. In the amendment, microfinance institutions licensed under the Microfinance Act were omitted in the exclusion list of the application for the new rule. In this regard, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to exclude microfinance institutions licensed under the Microfinance Act from the interest restrictions based on a ratio of earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization in determination of their taxable income. Mr. Speaker, next I will highlight the proposed amendment under the Excise Duty Act. The Act provides for annual inflation adjustments of the specific duty rates on all products. However, it has been observed that the adjustment may not always be appropriate for some products, depending on the economic and social environment facing these products at that time. To address this, I propose to empower the Commissioner General of KRA to exclude from inflation adjustment such products after consideration of the prevailing economic circumstances facing them. Mr. Speaker, last year, the Excise Duty Act was amended to introduce excise duty on all imported eggs. This was meant to protect local producers of eggs. However, we have noted that the tax has adversely affected the hatching business, as there is insufficient local capacity to supply all the required eggs for hatching. To address this situation, I propose to exempt from excise duty eggs from hatching imported by licensed hatcheries upon recommendation by the responsible Cabinet Secretary. Mr. Speaker, neutral spirit is an input for manufacture of pharmaceutical products. Manufacturers of pharmaceutical products, which are not subject to excise duty, are entitled to a refund of the excise duty paid on the raw materials or inputs. The processing of such refunds takes time, hence creating cash flow challenges. To address this concern, I propose to exempt neutral spirit used by the registered pharmaceutical manufacturers upon approval of the Commissioner General of KRA from excise duty. Mr. Speaker, currently, locally assembled motor vehicles are exempt from excise duty. In order to ensure the same treatment for manufactured passenger motor vehicles, I propose to exempt from excise duty locally manufactured passenger motor vehicles. This is aimed at encouraging investment in this sector and enhancing competitiveness of locally manufactured passenger motor vehicles. Mr. Speaker, gambling, gaming, and alcohol addiction have become prevalent in our society. These habits are extremely addictive and can result in a variety of harmful repercussions, especially to the youth. advertisements for alcoholic beverages, betting, and gaming contribute greatly to the promotion of these habits. To discourage the promotion of these products and activities, I propose to introduce excise duty of 15% on fees charged by all television stations, print media, billboards, and radio stations for advertisements of these activities. Mr. Speaker, in the recent years, innovations in the tobacco industry have led to the introduction of new products beyond e-cigarettes. These products continue to negatively affect the health of our citizens. The design of these products and the taxation regime makes them easily accessible to users, including the school children and the youth, thus leading to nicotine addiction and consequently smoking and use of other drugs. In order to prevent these habits and make the liquid nicotine used in these devices less accessible to users, including the school children and the youth, I propose to change the taxation regime for liquid nicotine from current shilling per unit to an excise duty of shilling 70 per milliliter. Mr. Speaker, in the bill, I have also proposed to increase the specific rates of excise duty for a number of products by 10% to generate additional revenue for the government. Given the recent global increase in oil prices, I have excluded petroleum products from this increase. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the proposed amendments under the Miscellaneous Fees and Levies Act. In order to promote manufacturing of pharmaceutical products, I propose to exempt inputs and raw materials imported by manufacturers of pharmaceutical products from payment of import declaration fees and railway development levy. This will encourage investments in the health sector and improve access to affordable health care services. Mr. Speaker, in order to support farmers who rear cows as well as pastoralist communities who depend on sale of hides and skin, I propose to reduce the export levy on the raw hides and skin from 80% or US dollars 0.5 per kilogram to 50 cents or US dollar 0.32 per kilogram. Mr. Speaker, on the amendments to enhance tax administration procedures, government agencies are expected to be sensitive and responsive to emerging customer needs. In this respect, the Kenya Revenue Authority has been on a journey of transformation to enhance customer-centric service delivery. In order to align the operation of the authorities with emerging trend, I propose to amend the Kenya Revenue Authority Act to change the name of the authority from Kenya Revenue Authority to Kenya Revenue Service. The change of the name is intended to rebrand the authority and transform its public image, thus enhance tax compliance through improved public relations and maintain a clear focus on taxpayers' needs. I have also proposed consequential amendments to other statutes which make reference to the name Kenya Revenue Authority and align them to the proposed new name. Mr. Speaker, we have noted that tax disputes take too long to conclude, especially after judgments by the Tax Appeals Tribunal. In order to protect the disputed tax revenue, I propose to amend the Tax Appeals Tribunal Act 2013 to require a deposit of 50% of the disputed tax revenue in a special account at the Central Bank of Kenya when the tribunal makes a ruling in favor of the Commissioner General of KRA, as the taxpayer proceeds to appeal the decision. I have also proposed that in case the taxpayer receives judgment in his or her favor on final determination of the matter, the 50% deposit shall be refunded to the taxpayer within 30 days after the final determination of the matter by the courts. Mr. Speaker, the Tax Procedure Act empowers the Commissioner General, KRA, to issue direction to the land registrar to put a caveat on land or restriction on the transaction for taxpayers with tax arrears. It is noted that the taxpayer may have other assets other than land which the Commissioner can put caveat or restriction on transfer to secure unpaid tax revenue. In this respect, I propose to amend the Tax Procedure Act to require registrars of ships, aircrafts, motor vehicles, and any other properties that may be used as security for unpaid taxes to restrict the disposal or transaction of these assets upon receipt of direction from the Commissioner. Mr. Speaker, The Tax Procedures Act empowers the Commissioner General KRA to request for additional information from the taxpayers in order to facilitate determination of an objection on assessment tax. The Act does not specify the number of times that the Commissioner can request for such information on a particular case. This prolongs the determination of tax disputes, as additional information can be requested severally, and any request for additional information provides the Commissioner with additional 60 days to make a decision. In order to address this gap, I propose to amend the Act to require the Commissioner to issue a decision on objection by taxpayer within one cycle of 60 days from the date of receiving a valid objection by a taxpayer. Mr. Speaker, Kenya ratified and deposited the Multilateral Convention for Mutually Administrative Service Assistance in the tax matter with the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information on Tax Matters in July 2020. Under this convention, Kenya is expected to exchange information on tax matters with tax jurisdictions that are members of the forum. In order to promote greater tax transparency among multinational enterprises, I propose to amend the Income Tax Act to require that multilateral enterprises which have been operational in Kenya to report the activities within Kenya and in other jurisdictions to the Commissioner General Kenya Revenue Authority. Mr. Speaker, the Statutory Instrument Act that became effective in 2013 provides for automatic expiry of the statutory instrument after 10 years from the date of their publication. In this respect, there are several tax-related regulations issued in accordance with the Act, as well as some that were issued prior to the enactment of the Act that will expire after the 10-year period. The expiry of these instruments will negatively affect tax administration and revenue collection. In this regard, I propose to amend the Statutory Instrument Act to exempt the tax-related regulations under the various tax laws from automatic expiry provided under the Act. Mr. Speaker, this administration has implemented socio-economic transformative programs and a devolved system of government that required enormous financial resources. At the same time, the country was confronted by some degree of security challenges, the twin global challenges of COVID-19 pandemic and climate change, and the desert locust invasion that impacted on food security. In the midst of all this, Mr. Speaker, the government has successfully maintained macroeconomic stability, achieved growth rates above that of sub-Saharan African region, and improved welfare of Kenyans. In conclusion, therefore, Mr. Speaker, our sustained investments since 2013 have significantly transformed our economy and strengthened our resilience. Encouraged by this, our economy has bounced back, giving our people incredible optimism, even in the situation of extreme challenges. Mr. Speaker, we are proud of our socio-economic achievement and seek to sustain high economic growth so as to improve the welfare of our people. Considering the envisaged development agenda and the limited fiscal space, we have carefully balanced the difficult choices in resource allocation in order to finance the highest priorities that will propel this country to a greater heights of prosperity. I am confident that we have made the right decisions that will accelerate the pace of our economic growth. At this point, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank His Excellency the President, Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta, for his leadership and guidance, which has transformed this country into a regional economic hub. I also thank my fellow cabinet secretaries, the respective principal secretaries, and various accounting officers and staff in all government, ministries, departments, and agencies for their support and contribution to the financial year 2022-2023 budget. Mr. Speaker, I also express gratitude to Kenyans for their rich and diverse contributions, proposals, and suggestions that help us to finalize this budget. My appreciation goes to first to you, Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, and your counterpart in Senate, the majority and minority leaders, and the entire House leadership, including the respective clerks, for overseeing the approval process of the budget estimates for the financial 2022-23 and the related document. Second, to the honorable members of the Budget and Appropriation Committee, the Finance and Budget Planning Committee, and all other departmental committees of this House, as well as the staff of Parliamentary Budget Office, for their constructive inputs during the approval process of the budget. Third, I recognize and appreciate the management and staff of the National Treasury who have worked tirelessly for long hours to ensure that this budget and supporting documents were prepared within new timelines to enable the presentation of this budget in April, thus paving way for the August general election. Fourth, the Kenya Revenue Authority, Central Bank of Kenya, Attorney General's Office, Commission on Revenue Allocation, financial sector regulators, and the various agencies under the National Treasury and the planning for their contribution and advice during the budget process. Fifth, my gratitude goes to our multilateral and bilateral development partners for their continued technical and financial support. Further, I thank the private sector for their sustained contribution to the growth of our economy. And sixth, I wish to appreciate the media and the non-state actors for the active engagement and participation in the financial 2022-2023 budget process. Mr. Speaker, allow me to once again thank all honorable members of the National Assembly and the Senate for their support in facilitating legislative proposals supporting the government's economic transformation agenda over the last 10 years. At this juncture, I wish honorable members the very best as they seek to renew their mandates with their electorates during the upcoming general election. My hope is that the electionary period will not distract us from our pursuit to solidify and sustain the economic growth trajectory we have realized over the years. Lastly, and not least, Mr. Speaker, I remain immensely grateful to my family for their love, understanding, regular encouragement, and above all, their unfailing support as I stare my demanding duties at the National Treasury and planning since my appointment to the docket. I thank you all, and may God bless you. The very last, Mr. Speaker, before I resume my seat, you recall that I have already submitted to this House the budget estimates and the Finance Bill 2022, together with accompanying documents as required by the Public Finance Management Act 2012. Today, I further submit the following documents to this August House and request that you gracefully receive them. Honorable Speaker, the documents include the budget statement of the financial year 2022-2023, the budget policy statement 2022, estimates of revenue, grants and loans for the financial year 2022-2023 budget, financial statement for the year 2022-2023 budget, medium-term debt management strategy 2022, sixth, budget highlights, the Mwananchi guide for the financial year 2022-2023, and lastly, the statistical annex to the budget statement for the financial year 2022-2023. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honourable members, that concludes the session by the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury on the presentation of the budget highlights for the financial year 2022-2023. Honourable members, time being 4:57 p.m. It's now time for the House to rise. The House stands adjourned till Tuesday, the 12th of February at 2:30 p.m. Honourable members, at the rise of the House, members are invited for a cup of tea, including our guests and the members' ministers' parking lots.
You have been watching a special broadcast.
Tugocokeria ngatho ni guthii na mbere na kunyitana ithuĩ tuma gĩikaro-inĩ kĩa mbunge kũrĩa CS wa kĩgĩna Ukur Yatani akorwo arĩkia kũheana kana gũthoma budget ya mwaka wa kĩgĩna wa 2022 nginya 2023. Tuko tukinyitania na andiki aitũ a mohoro wa Irwa Nyambura na mũndũ witũ Haron Njoroge wa Maina mambĩte hema kuria bunge-inĩ nene ya bũrũri kuria rĩu megũkorwo na mweke wa kũranĩria na abunge na ateti matiganĩte nĩgetha makorwo makĩheana mawoni mao igũrũ rĩgiĩ budget ĩrĩa yarĩkia gũthomwo nĩ CS Ukur Yatani. Nĩ atarĩria maũndũ meho maigana ũna marĩa mekuhutia ũhoro wĩgiĩ ũngania wa mbeca, ũgania wa kĩgĩna igũrũ rĩa mwaka ũyũ wa kĩgĩna wa 2022-2023. Reka cigana ũna thutha ũyũ nĩ egũkorwo kana CS nĩ egũkorwo akĩaranĩria na andĩki a mohoro kũrĩa gũkorwo akĩrikĩria mamwe ma mendekithia marĩa akorwo heana kũrĩa bunge nene ya bũrũri agĩtarĩria mũtaratara wa mahũthĩro ma mbeca. Ĩno arĩ budget yake ya mũthia rungu rwa wathani wa thirikari ya Jubilee. Ũguo nĩ kuga thutha wa gĩthurano kĩa mweri wa kanana ũrĩa ũgatuĩka president wa gatano wa bũrũri wa Kenya, ici nocio mbeca iria ekũhũthĩra nginya mweri wa gatandatũ mwaka tũrorete thutha wa tondũ mbeca ici ciathomwo cikwanjĩrĩria kũruta wĩra kuma mweri wa mũgwanja nginya mũthia wa mweri wa gatandatũ mwaka tũrorete wa 2023. Microphone icio ũrona mwena waku wa ũmotho nĩ meharĩrĩria ma CS nĩ ũkorwo akĩaranĩria na andĩki a mohoro nĩgetha athiĩ na mbere na gũthathaũra ũhoro wĩgiĩ mũgayani kana kũgayanio gwa kĩgĩna thĩinĩ wa budget. Harĩ budget ĩrĩa akorwo athoma mbeca iria gũkorwo ikĩhũthĩka harĩ mĩtaratara ya ũkũria na ũthii wa na mbere nĩ bilioni 715 akiuga thirikari kana kĩgĩna kĩrĩa gĩtigaru nĩgetha budget ikorwo ĩkĩihũra nĩ mbeca iria ikũhoywo gũkũ bũrũri-inĩ na nginya nja ya bũrũri wa Kenya. Honge cia ũgima wa mwĩrĩ na gĩthomo nĩ imwe cia honge iria igairwo mbeca iria nyingĩ mũno. Ririkana gĩthomo gĩkĩgairwo mbeca nyingĩ ta njĩra ya gũtigĩrĩra mũtaratara wa CBC ũrĩa warugũririo kana wanjĩrĩirie mwaka wa 2017 nĩ wakorwo ũkĩhĩtũkio kana ũkĩnyorokio na njĩra ĩrĩa yagĩrĩire. Makĩria ũguo harĩ mbeca cia igwo kĩeheri cia gwaka irathi nĩgetha arutwo arĩa megũkorwo magĩkĩrĩkia grade 6 makĩingĩra junior secondary gũkorwo na irathi njiganu nĩgetha makĩingĩra makorwo mena irathi cia gũthomera. Harĩ ũndũ ũngĩ ningĩ CS Ukur Yatani akorwo agĩtarĩria thĩinĩ wa budget ĩno akiuga indo iria ihũthĩkaga harĩ ũthondeki wa ngari mũno makĩria ngari cia ũkui wa mũingĩ nĩ ciehererio igoti ĩrĩ ta njĩra ya kũhũra njeki kambuni itiganĩte iria irĩ gũkũ bũrũri-inĩ igĩthiĩ na mbere na ũthondeki wa indo itiganĩte cia ũthondeki wa ngari cia ũkui wa mũingĩ. Tũrongoreri maũndũ mangĩ maigana ũna marĩa CS akorwo agĩtarĩria thibitarĩ mũnene wa Kenyatta wagairwo mũigana wa ciringi bilioni 18.1 milioni 700 nĩcio igũkorwo ikĩhũthĩka gwaka thoko itiganĩte gũkũ thĩinĩ wa bũrũri wa Kenya. Ciringi bilioni 1.1 nacio nĩ igũkorwo ikĩhũthĩka harĩ gwakĩra maabithaa a borithi na maabithaa a njera nyũmba nacio mũigana wa ciringi bilioni 1.2 ikorwo ikĩhũthĩka harĩ gwaka ceceni cia BRT bus rapid transport kũrĩa barabara-inĩ ya Thika Road iria ikoretwo igĩthiĩ na mbere na gwakwo na gũtuĩka itirĩ irarĩka ũndũ ikwanjia kũhũthĩka na itanya nĩ kũnyihia mũhatĩkano wa bara mũno makĩria mũciĩ wa gatagatĩ thĩinĩ. Ririkana nĩ gũtarĩria andĩki aitũ a mohoro wa Irwa Nyambura Haron Njoroge wa Maina mambĩte hema kũrĩa bunge-inĩ ya bũrũri nĩtũgũkorwo tũkĩnyitanĩra nao kahinda gatarĩ haraya kwa ihinda rĩrĩ tũnyitanĩre na wa Irwa Nyambura arĩ kũrĩa bunge atumenyithie maria ari namo kuma mwena ũcio. Waweru agĩkorwo nĩ ratũigua kuma gũkũ studio CS nĩ akĩrĩkia guthoma budget ya mwaka wa kigina wa 2022-2023 ni mariko uri namo kuwa mono cio wa bunge.
Thengi muno muriuki wa mucoki na ndire woike ha twina Harun Njoroge wa Maina twatinda twambikite kambe ya Inoro TV na njira igwete cikaro-ini nene cia bunge kuria minister wa kigina Ukuria Tani akorwo agituthomera budget iria nene muno bururi wa nakorwo nayo na muno makiria gitaru kia Afrika ya irathiro na toguo akorwo agitariria thutha wa kwaraniria na arunake aria mombite ngwataniro ya Afrika ya irathiro ni maramwitikiririe akorwo agithoma budget yake mbere ya mabururi macio mangi tondu tukoragwo twina uiguithanio wati gwakinya ni muthenya wa guthoma budget tugathoma hamwe nigetha mawatho meru makiria ma magoti magahambiriria kurutithio wira hamwe. Mamwe ma maundu maria ndona meyumiria na njira ya mwanya ni mithikire ya mbiro ya gukiria biashara toria tugutariirie honge itiganite cia thirikari iria ciagathikirwo kigina kiria giguciteithiriria gutacukia makinya matiganite mothi wa na mbere mwaka uyu tukite na muno makiria mbeca iria cikuhuthirwo kana magoti maria makigathikwo nigetha thirikari ikorwo ikiona mbeca cia gukinyaniria budget ino. Harun, igoti ria mbere riria ngwiciria rikuhatika ti andu othe andu amwe tutiite muno nino ya nicotine gwatuika ati tondu andu ingi ni undu wa kiria kuongererwo ni undu wa thigara kuongererwo magotire andu ingi ni mehereire kou na marigitare gukiuga ati thigara iria tumenyerete ni ikoragwo na ni iragira mwiri mirimo mingi andu ingi magithie thigara-ini iria cithondeketwo no taaramu wa kiriu na thigara icio ni iragucagiriria nginya andu anini mutugo-ini wa kugucia thigara no mothe minister ni acamukia giboko mwena ucio kia magoti ongere auga ati hari o lita imwe ya liquid iria kana mai maria mahuthagirwo guthondeka thigara iyo ariragia ciringi 70. Gwiciria igoti riu ni ria yumiria na njira ya mwanya na gwiciria muno taciari ni mekuri nyita mbaru tondu ni igoti ria kugiria ciana cigucie thigara.
Ni uhoro wa wa weru na ni undu uguteithiriria ni ukuririkana abunge tukiaria nao ona mathai-ini ma mbere ya budget ni megukoragwo magitariria ati no mende muno magoti mongererwo hari indo iria to nginya mundu ahuthire uguo hindi iria kindu gikuongererwo ta thigara icio ri ni kuga abunge ni mathie hau ni maigwa maiganira ona gwituka gukire ona ciuria imwe maragikorwo makiuria ciegie mutaratara wothe wa budget makiuga ndunarumirira watho na maundu ta macio wa weru.
Ni ndacoka ndona minister ni akinyukia ikinya ria mbere ria gucenjia ruhonge rwa ungania wa magoti na renda ricenjio uria rikinyanagiria mutaratara wa gukinyiria ndumiriri a Kenya no muno makiria nginya ritwa ria ruhonge rwa kungania magoti arenda rucenjio kainde-ini gaka turuita Kenya Revenue Authority KRA no minister roiga arenda rwitwo Kenya Revenue Services gucenjia guku urona ta kungikorwo na moimirira mari
ni ngiciria no njira tu ya kugeria kuruthondekerera ndui kuma tene nginya hindi ya mandiko andu ni mari gathina na arogoti aigoti kana etia aigoti riu ngiciria no kweheria authority ndui ihana mundu wiguru ria ku arakugwira no ritu iho agiuka gwitia magoti riu ngiciria hihi rigicenjio gutuika kuma authority rituike services ngiciria riu ni ta motungata ma ruhonge rwa motungata ma ungania wa magoti ndikana niguo ritwa riu rikuma no njira ngwiciria ya kuhuthahuthia tondu ririkane tugithie kuria kana ni uri wona maabitha acio magithie kungania magoti nginya andu mamba kuhinga nduka getha wihithe ngwiciria ni kweheraniria uritu ucio wa kiwatho na kurehe tari ruhonge rwa gutungata muingi toria thirikari yekire tuge ruhonge-ini rwa borithi ikimiruta police force ikimitwa police service.
Aha tuikarite niho minister wa kigina Ukuria Tani uka kurutira ndumiriri twambe tutinie uthathauri witu tuigue minister wa kigina Ukuria Tani arenda gutwira atia tumurie ciuria igiri kana ithatu makirire ciuma ngwataniro-ini ya Kenya Kwanza ti abunge ingi mwahu ucio makorwo magikinyia igongona-ini riri ria guthoma budget muthenya wa omothe mubunge ta wa Garissa Township aumire o riria minister aingirire oiga ati ndangenyita itemi mutaratara-ini uria iroiga ati ugithondekwo ndukinyanirie mitaratara ya watho iria igathikitwo ya guthondekera bururi budget. Minister wa Kigina Ukuria Tani niwe ucio aumetwo thutha ni maabitha agikiro kia iguru ministry-ini ya Kigina. Ndora mubunge wa Kigiharo Ndenyoro ne igira haha ndagika igire muhesh o tugitagirira kiria Minister Ukuria Tani egututariria budget wa miona atia. Kana wa mbere mwaho wanyu wina gatithio kana wina henwa na njirere irahuthirwo gukinyaniria mubango uyu tutaririe mathina mare mwena mo na mutaratara uyu wa guthondeka budget ya mwaka uyu.
Reke nyambe ndige kundura na maundu ma budget kurehwo kana kwa kurehwo mathaa maria magiriire. Nyambe thie kuri maundu maria mena bata muno hari andu aria maratwirorera. Njuge budget ya muthenya wa umuthi yuma budget yoraga andu aingi muno ngoro na yonania ni manati theru. President wa bururi wa Kenya na thirikari neta maikaraga Kenya ingi gukira iria Kenya ria andu a Kenya maikaraga tondu tugwiciragia president ni aguka augi uhoro wa bei ya indo iria tuhuthagira kaingi iria thite iguru muno. Ndanagweta uhoro ucio, ndanagweta uhoro wa gas kugwa, uhoro wa mutu kugwa, uhoro wa maguta kugwa, na ni kuonania ni manati theru. Either president ndana nabata na andu a Kenya na thirikari yake kana Kenya ria ikaraga ni ngurani na Kenya ria tuikaraga. So hari mwena ucio budget ino ndinarora mundu wa Kenya ona hanini.
Ndonona ta athaira mu Kenya murigo riria ehereria VAT indo iria cirehuthikaga motungata-ini ma urigitani.
Ungiarora wega biu VAT iria yeherio kana fees iria cieherio, ungirora statistics cia ni mbeca cigana na mbeca icio ikurwa cost ya uhoro wa andu guthii thibitari na kiwango kiigana atia. Ni ukuona hau ati mundu munene wekwo ni tondu mundu wa Kenya maundu maria maramutindika muno tha ici ni maundu ma meikarire na ni maundu ma kiria kuria, maundu ma kiria kwihumba, maundu macio mothe ni magwa thi muno.
Ni tugucoka reke twambe tuthikiririe Minister wa Kigina.
It's been a very important day for us and for the country. This is going to be a transitional budget, and you may have some questions which I now allow you to ask. If you have any question, Another question? Yeah, Faisal.
My name is Gary. The question would be basically just following up on the last question that has been asked. What is the key take home for the government? It feels like whatever is coming from the government is really bulking them down in regards to even the basic needs that they do need in the house. And probably this is something that might have taken care of in the finance bill that you just did.
Well, thank you very much. We will share this question with my Principal Secretary, Dr. Muya. But just to assure you that as National Treasury, as the Cabinet Secretary National Treasury, we'll be listening and we have very positive feedback from the public. Kenyans are concerned about the cost of living and we effectively address this. We've addressed the issue of fuel prices, where we'll be subsidizing substantially. We've been subsidizing for the last few months and we'll continue to do it until end of June, just to make sure that the prices does not go out of reach for the common man. Number two, one very important aspect is that we are aware that food security remains a key concern for us, and that's why we have already allocated resources to fertilizer, and we have proposed further allocation of 2.7 billion in the next financial year. In this financial year, last week we've allocated 3 billion Kenya shilling, and we intend to allocate additional resources of 2.7 billion for the fertilizer to enable farmers to plant their crops in good time, to enable farmers assess, because the price has been rising as a result of global issues which is beyond the confines of this country. The second question is that you asked what will be the projection, revenue projections that we are going to raise from the finance bill. My estimation is about 50 billion. And all of them does not touch basic commodities. They are in the luxury items. Issue of cigarettes, issue of gambling, advertisement on gambling, gaming, betting, and all these. It will give us a net revenue of about estimated 50 billion. Nothing on basic commodities were touched in terms of tax raises. I think the takeaway from is clearly we are very concerned about the cost of living, and that's why we are addressing fertilizer, fuel prices. These are areas that we are looking at. But substantially, the price is going to remain constant and even lower, maybe for the fertilizer.
One would say that some of these proposals are futuristic. What are some of the immediate repercussions that Kenyans could expect when you're talking about fertilizer subsidy, when you're talking about the fuel? Some of these things might appear futuristic. What are some of the most immediate needs that your ministry and the government will be looking into to make sure that Kenyans will not continue to suffer? Some of them are even calling and saying they're buying milk at 60 shillings as of now. They're buying bread at 70 shillings as of now.
What is some of the things that the government will do in the short term to make sure that Kenyans do not continue suffering as is?
I think you need to realize that from your assumption, it's not only futuristic, but some of these things are challenges that have been with us for the last few months. The issue of fuel. When there's an immediate reprieve in terms of subsidy that the government will be undertaking every month, that's not futuristic. It's current and it's continuing, and we are dealing with it. Even food production, because if we plant now, using the fertilizer subsidy we've given, in the next 2-3 months, whether you are planting whichever type of crop, you'll be getting the immediate relief. And these are things that we are looking at. But also look at some areas that we've already now either zero-rated or removed taxes. The issue of pharmaceutical product, the issue of vaccine, the issue of a number of things that are well captured in the budget. But importantly, we are not able to highlight all this. But when you unpack, you'll identify the takeaway for the common man. And they are quite generous when you unpack that. Maybe PS can elaborate more.
Yeah, I will elaborate on the point about the takeaways and add to what the Honourable Cabinet Secretary has said. Number one of the things that we have covered in the speech by the Cabinet Secretary is the question about pending bills. Because pending bills constitute a reduction in liquidity. And so by urging ministries, departments and agencies to make sure that they pay all the pending bills is to make sure that there are resources that are going to be available so that where businesses are hurting, there is a solution for them in terms of more resources being made available. I just also want to add on the issue of us addressing the issue about fuel. And it is something that is ongoing now, and the effects are going to be felt immediately, even during the budget period. And so we have listened to what Mwananchi has said by the time that we crafted the budget, and we have taken that into consideration because indeed we want this to be a very participatory process. Thank you.
Yeah.
Waziri, my name is Waweru Nyambura from Inoro TV.
There are two of you now, I don't know who.
I have the mic.
Okay, you.
My name is Waweru Nyambura from Inoro TV. What do you make of the accusations that you skipped, hopped and jumped some key processes outlined in the law, thereby ending up making this an event rather than a process?
And the funding that was going towards the airline to help it in its next transition. So one, will we see a reduction in the number of staff in KQ once the transition happens? And two, are we going to see maybe a reduction of the fleet and the routes that the airline flies to?
Yeah. I just want to, your question. As National Treasury, we do not just come from anywhere and go to Parliament. It's a process of due consultation, and we have the necessary approval from the Speaker, who is the head of Parliament. All the necessary process, steps, procedures have been duly followed. And we had actually even sought to seek authority or support and understanding of the rest of the East African community so that we can present our budget earlier because of election. And this is not the first time. Last election, as we are going to the last election, we also did the same. All the necessary process documentations were duly submitted to the National Assembly, discussed, debated, the budget policy statement, the debt management strategy. All these documents were forwarded to Parliament in good time, and therefore all the necessary processes have been followed. On the issue of KQ, Kenya Airways is a very strategic investment. We are not only looking at the flight, but we are looking at other auxiliary investments that come up with it, including, the export of flowers, including as a regional hub, Kenya as a diplomatic headquarters for the region, all these, and it's also the connections from here to the rest of the country. And by having it remain afloat, it's going to complement other business activities in this country. And so it's one institution that we cannot afford it to die. That's why we are supporting it, but we are doing it from the perspective that we must streamline, including the cash injections. We are not just giving money for the sake of it, but we want to make sure that there are certain reforms that are effectively and painfully undertaken, including reducing the number of flights, including even the number of the staff, but also looking at the general governance structure, streamlining so that they remain not only accountable, but also relevant in the competitive business environment.
In your speech, you said in the bill, I have proposed to increase the specific
How much money are they going to get?
You said in your speech that I have proposed to increase the specific rate of
excise duty for a number of products. What are these products that you're increasing by 10% to generate additional revenue for the government?
Okay.
You're a bit vague in that one.
Yeah, that's why I wanted you to unpack those within the tax, within the finance bill. These are basically nothing to do with the essential product. They are all targeted items on luxury. They have really nothing to do with the general population of this country. You had asked about the amount of allocations. The allocation we've been doing for the last, even this current financial year, and the reform process comes out with a package. We've already identified a transaction advisor. They have come up with an elaborate roadmap in terms of what needs to be done and the costing of the same, and the same have actually been onboarded in the budget. Last one. Yes.
$48 billion to the counties. We're just under 2 months to the end of the financial year. What word do you have for the county governments who still are waiting for the 148 billion shillings?
Foremost, I think as you understand well, we have a budget, we have allocation, but also depends the flow of revenue that we generate. Sometimes we fall behind by a month or so. But to a great extent, unlike 2020, most of the counties we are within. Maybe if there's a delay, it's about 1 month. But what has been happening is that we have a number of counties, significantly over 50%, who are just stocking their money in the accounts, but the movement is not there. Huge balances that's not moving. And we are just wondering when there are other competing priorities in terms of funding or projects that are quickly moving, we give projects a priority to those areas. And those counties, quite a number of counties are up to date, but there are a number of counties that are not making any moves in terms of the balances at the central bank, their own individual accounts. Money not moving is because of their inability to implement projects within the timelines required. So we are urging them also to spend their money so that they can continue receiving the disbursement as required. But we are aware that on average, we have not funded up to about a month. there are a few counties up to 2 months. And the 2 months are those counties that are not utilizing their money. Last one. Can you raise your voice?
Projections you've indicated.
What's wrong with it? I can't hear you well.
Speak up. I'm saying under revenue projections indicated that there will be an increase from 2.1 billion to 2.4. Maybe how could that be possible given that we know we are headed into an election cycle which in most cases tends to affect the business environment. Secondly, under the allocation of the economic stimulus program, you've allocated 2.1 billion for the empowerment against 5.8 environment. Why that the youth there's a serious concern on but you run the 2.1 billion and economic stimulus program then 5.8 billion.
Maybe I'll also ask my peers to come in. Almost, I want to assure you that we do not just come up with numbers. We base it on projections. The Kenya Revenue Authority has been doing very well in terms of surpassing their targets. And based on those projections and the economic activities that's going to abound next financial year, we are confident about raising that amount of resources, at least reaching the target. You know, this is going to be a different kind of election. It's a transitional election where the incumbent is not going to be running for an elective office. So we expect stability to continue. And at the same time, we are not anticipating any disruptions of the economic process. Business are going to continue to blossom. 2020 things were very rough because of the constrained business activities, the containment measures that have affected this. But we are expecting seamless, economic activities, and as a result of this, we expect to hit the revenue target as required. Regarding your second question. The 2.1 billion on the Kazi Mutani, these are basic engagement, the youth within mainly the informal settlements, within the urban centers. But the 5.8 in terms of support, these are activities that are actually going to also be done by the same group of people. But they are towards achievement of water security, achievement of road construction, like now substituting machines for labor, like maybe doing water system. So even part of this will be in form of employment, like let's say construction of classrooms, where Kenyans are going to get opportunity to now supply products, supply building materials, construction of desk. So through this, there is that interconnected stimulus that's going to be created across the country. But the 2.1 for the Kazi Mutani is specific. We are now, youth are going to be engaged in clearing drainage, dealing with issues of hygiene within the settlement, working on the social projects. But even the other one is partly going to contribute to general employment. I want to, yes, you want to?
Even as you ask us to unpack the finance bill, can you assure Kenyans that it is a Mwananchi budget?
I confidently assure you that this is a Mwananchi-friendly budget. No surprises as you unpack the finance bill. You'll see for yourself that whatever we are proposed to do is for the greater good of the Kenyan public. The issues where we are raising taxes are things that have been a social problem to our community. Look at the issues of gambling. Look at issues of betting. Look at issues of advertisement for alcoholic products. Can you exactly say that socially they contribute revenue, but they do not contribute the social fabric of communities. The Kenyan youth are very fragile, and therefore they need to be protected from too much exposure in terms of those social vices that are going to derail not only their education but even their health. Thank you very much.
Okay. Wait.
Nobody's running with
Thengio muno ni minister wa kigena ukuria tani agithathaura mamwe ma maundu maria akorwo agithoma kuria no ona tutigwamba kumaithirania hatu na Harun Njoroge wa Maina guguikia Nyeri tucemanie na Martin Munene atutaririe uria kuria county-ini ya rore marathathaura kana uria mayukia budget ya muthenya wa muthe. Martin Munene agikorwo ni uranyamukira kiharo ni giaku.
na twi tauni-ini ya Nyeri na haha haria turi hena athuri mehana ndia tukorwo tukiaria na odeka nini magitwire niki makorwo makiigua niki kia makenia na kana matanya maria makiuma namo ni makorwo magikinyanira. Tukwenjera na muthuri we haha gwenda unjire witagwo atia na unjire atiriri budget ni yakirikia guthomwo ringi we matanya maku mauma mariku na ringi ni maundu mariku we waigua magigukenia na kana ni mariku matana gukenia.
Hamaritwa njitagwo David Mathenge ndathikiriria budget iyo uria ya githomo na nie kaundu karia kangenia no kau ka mwena wa githomo no maya mangi ta riu mwena wa mbeca cia arimi icio maneyo riu hau ni tukoragwo tuihuitie mai nda tondu tutiramenya wajikuru uri kuria mugunda kana ikumukinyira ikana igukinyira andu aria nene mari okuria iguru kaundu kangi ni gaka kairio icia mwena wa irio ni tuigwa ni mahutia kaundu kau maturorere hau tondu andu ni ahutu biu kwa thaici muturire uri iguru munene thaici muturire kuringana uria ikaire ri thaici hona kamukwa karia gaguciuha uguo kangituika ndungiukira kaundu kangi ni kamwena wigie maguta maturorere hau biu riu uko kuri ndu tuhinyiririe ni ucio wa mwena wigie maguta na twakigwa mbeca ni maragicainire na uria igukenera riu tutakioya atiriri maguta ma magatukinyira ri kana tuguturo tuigwe mbeca ni cia sainirwo no itire ciauma urathi gusaini kindu no ikumbire tirio nake
anwega tukorwo tukiaria na muthuri ungi we haha gwenda unjire witagwo atia akamwiria tuthiete hari uyu unjire we waigua atia na ringi ni maundu mariku magukenia kana ni mariku utanaigua waiganira nimo.
Hamarito njitagwo ri githaka no mustireni kindu kiria kiangenia hari budget ino ri ni uhoro wa relief ya irio andu bururi uyu witu ni ahutu muno tondu twagire mbeca nukona turahurwo haro igire tukahurwo haro ya kwaga irio cia na tugacoka tukahurwo haro ya finance tugakorwo kina muhuko witu nduri mbeca tondu hingoro kuona mutuni wa irio wakinya kina igana riki nduri utire guturira maraturira nta marenda guturaga na maraturaga o kahora na njira yake ya irio cia ndaru mostly ndingihoya budget ino itu mbia icio kuria ciaroketwo ri ni ikinyira kina kuria kwagirire tondu mostly tukoraga atiriri mbia ciarikia kwaroketirwo kindu ri haha gatagati ri kiria gikinyaga ni kindu kinini iria nyingi itikinyaga
anwega tukirikiriria haha he muthuri we gwenda unjire witagwo atia na unjire niki waigua gia gukenia niki gitana gukenia matanya maku ni makinyanira.
Kwa maritwa njitagwo Jack Wachira na ndi muikari wa Nyeri na kwaria ma budget ni njega ona gutuika na ni ndaigua hena handu mararirikana youth hau ha youth na hatukenia tondu tuona thirikari itu ni raririkana horo wa youth no kiuria ni giki ayuthi aitu kwaria mamatire na mawira na mbeca ici nyingi cikinyagira andu aria mena connection mundu utari na connection athiragiro haha kianda ndangikinyirwo ni mbeca icio wakeri ni nda kwaria mamo Kenya ni muhutu wajiko ni muhutu haha guku mashinani na tukiaria hau tukinyanetie na uchumire maguta nimo makontrolaga kila kindu na hau tukinyanetie na maguta tha ici turorura haha na haria tugetha maguta to ngari ni ikurugamira barana nicio citurithagia na wakeri maguta nimo makontrolaga kindu gitagwo price ya irio maga control price ya indo iria turagura kina fertilizer kina ndo koguo thirikari ni turorere tu hau no aikorwo kigwa uria aikari a Nyeri makorwo makiuga no ririkane budget ino ni ahutia uhoro wa kindu gigwitwo urimi na njira ya mwanya gugituika ati kwina mbeca igukorwo ikirutirwo arimi ihinda riri ria marorete kuhanda na oho uhoro wa kindu gigwitwo thogora wa fertilizer ukorwo ikiongererwo fertilizer ikiongererwo mbeca nigetha makorwo kana muguri akorwo akigura kindu kana fertilizer na mbeca irithi na kuma tukwamba tucoke kuria bunge muthu
muthuri ogwitwo ti wa Weru ari hau na Weru ndiukani urajigwa hena kiuria andu haha ndiraigwa makiuga uhoro wa kindu gigwitwo maguta no uhoro wa kindu gigwitwo mutu kana kindu gigwitwo gia kuria ndiwe kana we hari uri no akorwo ukigwa ndereti ino ikiariririo na ndakorwo ukigwa mukiuria ciuria ni mundu gwitwo CS Ukuru Yatani ni akorwo akihutia maundu maya meri ugithiaga na mbere gwitutariria uria budget ino ikarite
deadlines ici what is different deadline ya mwaka uyu na iria ingi ciothe twona corona
gwiciria kindu kia mbere ni tukwenda tukuririkane ati pending bills cia deadline ino ni cio cia mwisho cia thirikari ino na gwiciria ni no nginya na ithu turute wira muno nigetha tutigatige thirikari iyo ingiroka na bill cia thirikari ino ya term ino ya miaka 10 ndu term ino ni ya miaka 10 no twathi kurikia ino ni budget ya munene ya mwisho twathi kumirikia twego ni guko tukihakikisha gutire bill ya hitukia mweri 1 wa Julai ndio hitukia mweri 1 wa Julai tukwanjie ru kurehe gathina ka andu kuria no waheanire wira uyu kwatha kungithogothanio thirikari ni guthii kurege guthii uria gubangitwo andu no morirwo ni mbeca na tutingenda kuhane uguo nikio turaigwo na ithui pending bills cirihwo mbere ya mwaka uyu uthire mbere ya official budget ya mwaka uyu uthire mweri 30 wa June.
Alright, kia mwisho ngune njujigo tukwitikanaire ati ndigakuingata no tuingira rera-ini imwe kwa imwe tukiaragia uguo tuguthie na mbere na mamwe ma maundu maria budget ya gikorwo ikirekereria na mamwe ma maundu maria tuoya indo imwe cia urigitani ni ciehererio VAT ni kaundu gekwagirithia ruhonge rwa ngima wa mwiri
gwiciria nundu kindu kire nundu twambe tumenye ati VAT ni yatumaga maundu mathie magegoro thirikari ingihota kweheria VAT especially on essential services kana ni cia thirikari kana ni cia urigitari kana ni cia gukua anake cia boda ni twateithia because the idea here ni ku reduce cost ya basic services na niguo thirikari irageria gwika thaici we are hoping how ni hoto gukinya
good
yes
thank you muno Kimani Gujiri wa Wambugu mubunge wa Nyeri town
ucoke ni muraihu
karibu sana Kimani wa Icung'wa
amuheretwo ari akwa
di kwenda kuingira hau to ndaingira hau ngero I am the tallest karibu sana mubunge wa kuria gwitu kuria turigainie Kikuyu kiambiriria ngwaci nyingi ni budget ya mwananchi to uria yero ni minister wa kigina
mwananchi uriku budget ya itonga mwananchi ndari handu aratarwo na ndari handu arorwo no ni arorwo na njira ya kuhinyiririo riria wauga urarehe mivango ya uria ukuongerera igoti kuri andu a boda na matereva ma tuktuk ati marihagire passengers ao insurance riu ta matatu kana bathi mundu wa boda kuhota gukurihira insurance ati wawe rwa gukua we nwe wagirie thirikari ikorwo na mivango na mitaratara yoria thirikari ingihuthira kigina ta kia NHIF gutigirira we na personal accident cover thiini wa muvango wa NHIF neo proposal ito thiini wa Kenya Kwanza tukona NHIF ina personal accident cover nigetha ndukaigire murigo ucio mundu mutwarithio wa boda ndukaigire mundu wa tuktuk ati riu arihagire insurance no kiria ministry reka kana Ukura reka ni gucaria biashara kuria ne makambuni ma insurance niko ndakwira no ne budget ya itonga atwira ne aheanete bilioni 3 cia fertilizer mwaka uyu na ndukarigano last week aratwirite ni maheana bilioni 5.7 umuthe riu ningi ni ahithura uga ti 5.7 araheanite 3 maheni auga 2.7 ekuheana mwaka uyu ngiturathie kuma July koguo ni kuga atia mbeca iria aratwiraga iheanetwo fertilizer wa mbere murimi wa kawaida mwananchi ndahota kuhuthira mbeca icio mwaka uyu by the time urajia kuhuthira bilioni 3 riu kuruta fertilizer niguo mara advertise uhoro wa fertilizer tika turia tunini turare NCPB maraheanire nikio mareraga andu mihuko 10 ona kienda mihuko 1,000 ni kuga mwaka uguthira fertilizer tare oneka arimi marakoretwo aingi marikia season yao ya kuhanda mwaka uyu ungi naguo ri githe tiguo ngiagekira bilioni 6 uhoro-ini wa ngirigasha na fertilizer nigetha kimera gigioka kuhandirwo ri andu makome na fertilizer eketwo procurement mathito ati murimi agathio kuya fertilizer uguo Ukuru Yatani ndareka wa mwisho rora estimate ciake cia revenue arauga tukungania arakadiria tukungania 2.14 trillion cia ordinary revenue ekuhuthira trillion 3.3 ne kuga ne gukomba kindu na total revenue cia kindu 2.4 something egukomba deficit ya kindu trillion 846 aga gukinyia revenue estimate icio cia 2.14 na mwaka wa githurano aweru no to bet nawe haha ndegukinyia trilioni 2 cia kongania igoti kwi mwaka wa githurano. Arauga aranka economic growth ya 6% na ngirigaca ni kilimo kiu we utarahe andu mbegu kana fertilizer ya kuhanda gegukura kuna riua riria riarite ona mbura gutire. Ni ate service industry ni uhoro ta wa utari mwaka wa githurano ri we agiciria ri ni hatari igana moka Kenya mwaka wa githurano. Mabũrũri maingĩ marĩa mena atari matirehaga atari gũkũ mwaka wa gĩthurano. Koguo kiugura project economic growth ya 6% nĩ kwĩhenia. Meciria makwa mwaka ũyũ tugeretie mũno tukona economic growth ya kĩndũ 4 at most 4.5%. nĩ kuga economy ndehota kũngania revenue ĩrĩa mareka yaga kũngania thirikari ĩgũbocwo gũkomba makĩria yakomba makĩria thirikari rĩ niĩ nawe mwananchi wa kawaida maisha nĩ gũtũritũhĩra megũthiĩ na mbere na gũtũritũhĩra tondũ nĩ twatuĩka crowded out of the market ya ngombo. Biacara nĩ yagĩa goro kũ transact mathogora maindo no gũthiĩ na mbere na kũhaica.
Kĩa mũico Muhesh no gũtemanio yatemanio kũu kũngĩ nĩ mwĩta mbunge nĩ nyuĩ mũkũmĩkinyanĩria mwaho wanyu rĩ wĩ ambunge aiganu mangĩhota gũkinyanĩria mĩbango ĩyo nĩ mũgwĩka
kũngĩ na nĩ wega cemania haha mũrata wakwa gwĩtwo kanini kega nĩ gũthũrima ĩgũka tũthũrime na nĩkĩo ndauga maũndũ mau mamwe marĩa nĩ itaretekania namo niĩ nĩ ngũmobilize mwaho witũ tutigire maundu maria meho ma kuhinyiriria mwananchi wa kawaida tutinahitukia maundu ta macio raigwa yatani akiuga haha te ma tax appeals tribunal o thirikari ino muhinyaniririo ĩkorwo kuhinya andu gutumira KRA uge ate wathi wekererwo igoti ria bilioni 1 uka deposit 50% yacio na CBK koguo ũrĩigagĩrĩrwo magoti ma bilioni 1 ta mutumia ũrĩa gwetwo Tabitha Karanja kana Humphrey Kariuki wa kũigĩrwo bilioni 40 agacoka akerwo aige igoti-inĩ bilioni 20. Thirikari nĩ mũrĩhaga baita ya mbia icio rero iga igoti-inĩ. Koguo kwĩ maũndũ mangĩ tũtegwĩtĩkĩra aya Jubilee na ODM metĩkĩra he harĩa mahũragĩrĩrio magakĩrwo metĩkĩre metĩkĩra nĩ ũhoro wao no ithuĩ tũkũrũgama na kĩhoto na mwananchi wa kawaida. Budget ya itonga matwarithie ne haki yao gutire mundu tukugiria twarithie no maundu maria makonie mwananchi wa kawaida na no ngumaririkania na no nguikarange maririkanagia ati muthia ohoro ti kambuni icio cia insurance muracariria biashara ikumuhe wira muthia ohoro mwananchi wa kawaida ucio urenda kuhinyiriria ucio nowe gucoka guthii kuhoya kura. Koguo muteti wothe nyumba eno ri agioka guthurima budget iyo ri oke na meciria ati arathie githurano na arathie githurano gukora muingi ti tonga iria ci Nairobi iramubangira guku.
Thank you muno Icung'wa. Karibu sana.
Thie Gikuyu.
O uria gutigĩire gĩturwa no gwa gũtigĩra rĩera.
Ogo adiga. Muthenya wa muthi.
Wa mbere turambĩrĩria na kũrania nĩ ya mwananchi toguo
budget ino na nĩ tuge minister ti budget ya gũthomaga. Twambe twĩtĩkanĩrie ũguo atĩ minister ndagũkĩte gũthoma budget nĩ ithuĩ tũgathondeka na budget ĩthondekagwo nĩ ambunge no ngĩigua mũmbunge ũrathiĩ na kũrĩa nja gũthiĩ kuga atĩ ũrĩa budget ĩtarĩ njega atĩ budget ĩno nĩ ya kũhatĩria mwananchi ũcio ti mũmbunge ũramenya wĩra wake tondũ ũmũthĩ no gũtemanio yatemanio. Minister uga atĩrĩrĩ mendekithia marĩa ndĩrenda rĩ nĩ mũmaya mũthiĩ mũmathũrime mungiona mari mega ri muhitukie mungiona kuri handu ha kubatara gucenjio ri mucenjie. Koguo ungiigua mundu urambiriria kuhura ndeto ino minister athomo muthi ndireciria ona ndaramenya wira wake ta mumbunge to umuthi no gutemanio yatemanio ithuĩ turi kuria bunge riu nĩ gutwarwo kuri committee na ndigutwarwo kuri committee yakwa peke yake ya budget igutwarwo kuri committees ciothe gutigirira committees ciothe nĩ cianengerwo copy ya mendekithia macio tucoke tugie na kahinda kathi ko 14 ka muingi wothe wa Kenya urute mendekithia mao na muthenya ucio ni tugukorwo tukiwanirira riria a Kenya maguka mbere itu maugi atiriri mendekithia-ini maya ri haha ni turanda turahatiririo haha niho tureciria ta tungithondekerwo no kaundu kau tutira turakinya mundu rauga ati budget ino ni njega kana ni njuru ni mundu raruga mbere ya ndarama. However ni wega njugi atiriri hari mendekithia macio ni ndrona maundu mamwe mega na maundu mamwe mega ta mamwe maria ndona hauri ni ta guthondeka thibitari 50 bururi-ini wothe na thibitari icio ri irathondekwo niki irathondekwo ni gukorwo atiriri kuri level 3 hospital irathondekirwo kundu wetagwo Mukuru kwa Njenga, irathondekwo Kibira, irathondekwo the informal sector iria wonaga president Uhuru Muigai wa Kenyatta akihingura utuku. Icio ni thibitari iria ironaniria atiriri ingithondekwo matura-ini mothe ri thibitari wa Kenyatta uri koragwo na arwaru aria maremwa guthondekeka thibitari cia matura-ini na ni kinya riega muno uguo na tugetikira mbeca icio ni tugwika atia ni tugwitikana ndigwe ungirugama kubinga uhoro ucio.
No he mundu ngiuria atiriri guthondeka thibitari ni undu umwe, gucihe ndawa na ndagitari ni undu ungi, na ni wira uria gatiba ihete thirikari cia county iria cituire cicerithagirio mbeca cigukinyaniria mubango
mbeca na neke njuge atiriri thirikari kirereka ni kugwatia county government igwatio ni kunyitirira nigetha twamuthondekera thibitari ri ndawa cia mbere na marigitari ri acio ni tukumahe ma mbere hau hangi iragwo ndindiko niri maguru na andu matige kwigwatagia thirikari cia county ni itige kwigwatagia tondu thina uria ukoragwo hari thirikari cia county riria matumirwo nginya mbeca cia kugura ndawa mathiaga gwaka mabarabara kana magathi gwika maundu maria matatarainie na mbeca uria kurigana uria matarirwo. However njuge atiriri ino ni budget ya riria thirikari irakinya muico na ingikambiriria na riria twathie hari budget ino ri ni kuga ati ino ngade ni guthomera thomo budget ni oi ati umuthi minister aguthomaga budget na minister wa Kenya ndathomaga budget. Mundu uri uthomaga budget ni chairman wa budget ni uthomaga budget iria ihikakorwo ihitukitio ni bunge riria kanini agathoma kana mundu uri ungikorwo ari chairman athome budget kuria floor iyo ni budget iria ikagirwo kirore ndeto iria minister ya haha gutire kirore cikiritwo ni mugathe president igakorwo iri watho riria tukahitukia mweri uyu ungi wa gatano.
Urenda kuga nduonete tundu turia 10 tuongererwo magoti tiga maguta tondu tu minister ni arega gucokia ndakwira atiriri maya ni mendikithia na ndeto ici thikiraria tuongererwo igoti
tugiria atiriri macio ni mendikithia minister na endikithia angikorwo abunge ni makuona hatire kihoto kia kindu gukorwo gikiongererwo ri kaundu kau gatibandaire gukorwo akihituka na ucio ti watho ni wega ngwire maundu maria mothe minister agweta ri ni mendikithia abunge no mangihota kuhitukia kana marege maundu macio koguo ira mubunge wanyu ira mubunge wa itura riaku etikire gugakorwo bunge guku agikorwo kuri undu hihi ungikorwo ukihatiriria mwana inchi ri kana uria arona utari mwega ri arugame kuria ahinge uhoro ucio na uhoro ucio utuike ni wa kuhinga
tukuhinga kiharo na Harun Njoroge wa Maina mena mubunge wa county Sabina Wanjiru wacege matutaririo ria muna budget ya
thank you bro awero mheshimiwa Sabina hii tuhe woni waku wigie budget yo waigua ni irarumbuia muingi wa Kenya kana wa meigua atia woni waku
gwenda kwaria hakwa tondu nie ndi muikarigite wa ugima wa mwiri na njuge wa mbere budget kana medikithia maratokorwo na muthenya wa umuthe ni megukorwo magiteithiriria muno mu Kenya muno horo wa gutigirira horo uria
acio ni andiki aitu a mohoro Harun Njoroge wa Maina na Wairũ wa Nyambura magithina mbere na kwaniria na atongoria na ateti matiganite aria mari kuria bunge maria onao mekurumagirira igongona riu ria CS Kuria Tani agithoma budget ya mwaka wa kigina ya 2022 tuko tukimenyithia maoni maria marathi na mbere na kurekererio ni ateti atongoria na nginya muingi kuria matura-ini nigetha oikare utaukeirwo wega ni uria budget ya bururi wa Kenya ikaire twaucokere ngatho cia mwanya ni kunyitana ithio kuma rucine riria guthererukire twaguthathaurira uhoro wigie budget ino ugayania wa mbeca gatagati ka maundu mangi matiganite gukinya ndagika ino na hau niho tugukinya muthia umemereki uyu wa guthathaura kana gutaririo ria budget ikuhanaga no mohoro-ini magitu ma inoro hwaini na thaa 3 nitukurehera riboti ici na njira ndikiru cio ria budget ya bururi wa Kenya ikaire ario budget ya muthia rungu rwa utongoria wa president Uhuru Kenyatta niyo nene muno thiini wa bururi wa Kenya na niyo yathomwo mieri iri mbere ya riria budget ithomagwo kumana na githurano kia mweri wa kanana tariki 9 nigukorwo kone yathomwo mweri wa gatandatu abunge maya ukorwo matekuoneka kuria bunge magithi kuria matura-ini kuha muingi mbere ya githurano kinene nie njitago muriki wa Macoki ngatho cia mwanya ni gutucagura na gutuyokera mathaa maku tukumenyithie ciigie budget gia na hwaini mwega othi na mbere na kunyitania na ithu.
ciringi 350 na nyuki.
Twina mugunda mwena wa Nanyuki wetagwo The Great Oasis Gardens na thogora ucio.
They say the best way to find yourself is losing yourself in the service of others.
Cascade Institute of Hospitality ni turaharĩrĩria na gũkũria rũciaro rũrĩa rũroka rwa taaramu thĩinĩ wa industry ya ũtugani nĩyo hospitality. Tũheanaga kothi tambũrĩkanĩte kĩmabũrũri cia certificate na diploma harĩ hospitality management, culinary arts, pastry and baking na tourism. Kothi citũ nĩ hetũkie nĩ honge iria itongoretie cia ũtugani na ũgendi. Ũkomũthĩ tũgũtue mũtaaramu. Ũhoro makĩria tũhũrĩre thimũ 0703 777 kana 0791 777
An oasis of excellence.
Riu no wigwatire plot thutha wa Simba Cement na Kuru City na thogora mwega wa 599,000. Tuhurire thimu 0723 032 522 kana utume kiugo plot kuri 21404. Highsop Properties Limited, a culture of trust.
Mwega muikari wa Kieni amaritwa njitagwo Alex kama uwa wacira watoto ndina point ithatu ingenda tunyitane naye na tutewira nacio urimi uthereme na mawira bathi hari mbeũ njithi wa keri hari githomo waragania hari ugai wa basari na twake irathi citũ na macukuru maitũ niĩ ndĩ mũtongoria waku ngũthikĩrĩrie na ndware bunge motions na bills ikuota guteithia mũtũrĩre waku. Reke tunyitane nawe thĩinĩ wa mweri wa kana hĩndĩ ya nominations na harĩa mũico-inĩ mweri wa kanana ũndue mũmbunge waku through kura yaku. Reke Kieni gĩthereme na wacira wake.
Okay, twiha matu wetagwo Dhahabu Plains phase 2 phase 1 ni yathirire
na tukahena title deed ciothe
ukaneana
ciothe tourism guku ni ukrite na njere
mikawa ni wera
ko muno to ni hakuwe na Thika town ni hakuwe na Embu town na ukenda guthi Garissa no guthi
Garissa na Machakos rio haha haya basi nike ngwire Dhahabu Plains phase 2 kudia turendia no ti bro
uroti cia Dhahabu Plains matu phase 2 irio rabukaga na 170 riu uraheo mweko wa kubuku na 50 peke yake.
Ini ngoma gani?
Ina Gloria. Alafu kuna hii. Hii sasa ndio ile noma. Alafu imetoka leo. Alafu unajua wanasema nini? Ati duru za kuaminika siku hizi haziaminiki kabisa. Alafu unaona ukipanda April unapata mazao kabisa. Alafu hata ng'ombe asipendagi baridi, lazima usinunulie duvet.
Nyosha shilingi na Safaricom. Pata hadi 100% data zaidi bila kulipa zaidi. Imarisha maisha on the fastest and most reliable 4G network in Kenya. Alafu piga star 544# au fungua my Safaricom app kupata data yako leo. This is a permanent offer. Safaricom is for you.
Shesheni ya Inoro TV.
Presenting the new Harpic bathroom cleaner. Compared to ordinary detergents, its thick formulation gives you superior cleaning and kills 99.9% of germs and viruses all around the bathroom.
maitho mayo ratuona namo ni kiheo kinene na mahingukire rucini na angikorwo hitaringi hari ungi uratwirora no kuigwa ratuigwa ndangihota gutwirorera hau niho menyagira kiheo kia maundu mothe oronao ni anyiti ogeni guku tondu tu appreciate ga mundu wothe na tugakaribisha family yothe gutikumakania uri ohana kana ikero ciaku na ino gwiraga ni thibitari hakuhi nawe yatuika thibitari hakuhi nawe tondu tari maundu maria turenda gukwira ma happy zoster gemaine na uhoro igie maitho na tuguthomithio ni Dr. Patrick Kibe uria ni mutaaramu wa guthinjana maitho na kumarigita kuma kuri AIC Kijabi Mission Hospital niwe twinake hwaine wo muthi na rugo kirugo ndagitari ona hatiri undu ungi no gukurekereria nigetho tuthomithie inde mbere yogo karibu sana.
Asante.
Yes.
Maretwa makwa otoguo maigua jitagwo Patrick Kibe nimete AIC Kijabi Mission Hospital na irakwa ni kurigita maitho uguo ningikuhoya muthikiriria na mwiroreri witũ Inoro TV ukuhiririe niguo tuthome twi hamwe koguo ndenda kumukaribisha niguo tumenye ugima witũ wa mwiri hasa undu konie maitho. Karibuni sana.
Asante. So tukeri horo igi happy zosters na niguo nete umiongereria ritwa ringiria gicanza menya ni tondu ndikwenda kuthiora rurimi kendigire hau.
Thank you. Umuthi turaria uhoro wa happy zoster ophthalmicus. Happy zoster ophthalmicus. Riria turaria uhoro wa happy zoster ophthalmicus ni riria wabui nerve ya gatano agagomba kwa itaramba kwa uhoro wa murimu ucio ri reke nyambe ndaririe uria riria turaria uhoro wa happy zoster ophthalmicus ni kikinyitagwo. Mwiri-ini wa mundu ni kuri kindu gitagwo nerves. No rio toy nerves ni ki no ndimwire ahinge maitho no ria wi hakuhi nake amuhutie handu toguo ndirehutia ona utekuona ni ukuigua hena mundu wa kuhutia kana hena kindu gia kuhutia. Kire gitumaga umenye ati hena kindu gia kuhutia ri ni nerves. Mikiheo ya nerves yoyaga ndumiriri kuma hau wahutio igatora thiini wa hakiri ka interpret ikauga ni wahutio. Ihana waya cia thitima nerves. Twi haha studio thitima iria turatumira yumite Kindaruma yukite na waya nginya igakinya haha naguo mwiri witu ni uri waya ta icio na nicio tureta nerves ati ungihuti kuya message kuma hau wahutio itware thiini wa hakiri icio nicio tureta nerves. Oguo riria turaria uhoro wa happy zoster ophthalmicus ni nerve imwe iria tukwariria riria ihutitio ni murimu kana ni virus ya muthemba fulani ira tukwariria muthenya wa muthi. Thiini wa hakiri cia mundu ri hari nerves 12 tucietaga 12 cranial nerves.
We thiini wa hakiri
these ni nerves iria cioriginated kana ciumite thiini wa hakiri cikoragwo ciri 12. There are 12 pairs. Imwe yayo ri etagwo fifth nerve kana ritwa ringi ria githungu trigeminus. Dauga tukoragwo twina 12 nerves tucietaga 12 cranial nerves iria originated kana ciumite thiini wa hakiri. There are only 12 pairs. Iwe ya mbere ya keri ya gatatu ya kana nginya 12 iria turaririo muthiri etagwo fifth cranial nerve na ritwa ringi ithakari etagwo trigeminus. Ndenda ndukanyite trigeminus no umenye ni nerve ya gatano kuma hari 12 iria ciumite thiini wa mutwe. Nerve yo ya gatano ri etagwo trigeminus ri na ritwa inene ri ikoragwo ina njaga ithatu. Ina njaga ithatu na njaga icio ithatu ri cithiete handu tofauti. Okay, neria turari uhoro wayo ri ni mwe gatagati wa njaga ici. Ndiramba gutariria niguo tukiuga ni kwari uhoro wa murimu ucio ri tukorwo tukimenya niki turaria nakyo. Kenjokere ringi ati thiini wa hakiri ni hari nerves 12 tucietaga 12 cranial nerves iria originated kuma hakiri icio ingi ciothe ri itiumite hakiri ciumite spinal cord noguo no ici 12 ri 12 cranial nerves ri imwe yacio ariyo ya gatano etagwo trigeminus na rito inene nekoragwo na njaga cigana ithatu. Njaga icio ithatu ri imwe ya njaga icio niyo turaririo muthi riria inyititwo ni murimu. Tungirora mbica-ini iharia screen-ini ri nerve imwe iria yumite thiini wa hakiri gatagati ga icio 12 etagwo trigemina na njaga ithatu. Njaga ya mbere ri ya nerve iyo ri ni no turamiona ndimikirite raini wa rangi wa green. Okay, njaga ya keri ri nino thirukite haha iniuru-ini, na njaga ya gatatu ri nino tumikirite rangi wa orange. Ekiuma thiini wa hakiri ni imwe no yauma hau ri ikagayukana njaga ithatu. Njaga ya mbere ariyo ni ra supply ino yothe kuma iniuru-ini guka ritho guka haha thithi igacoka thiini wa hakiri hari nyitanire. Njaga ya keri ri nino yukite igathiururuka haha iniuru mwena-ini na igoka nginya haha ruthia-ini haha ino uguo.